Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto immortal Highschool of the Dead Harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Methos QB777 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 0, Prelude to the Dead. POV Naruto. Looking back at all the things I have done, I must say that the shinobi world was harder than this. When I appeared from Kakashi's portal, I found myself in the middle of a park in Tokanosa City. Most would think that I would freak out, but over the year of the Fourth Great War, I had learned to force calm into myself. The first thing I did after appearing was vanishing into the shadows. I had to learn more about my new environment. The goddess that spoke to me in my brief transition said I had to help this world, and that even though it would seem like hell, I would find what I wanted the most. I also needed to procure some sort of protection for my eyes. Nagato had awakened my Rinnegan, partially, after his invasion of Konoha, though mine was far different. I had near-perfect control, and could learn every element. Eventually, with enough training, I could execute jutsu without hand signs. Due to my Uzumaki heritage, I could also understand Fuinjutsu perfectly, though I needed to get my calligraphy up before trying anything. I was fortunate that Jiraiya-sensei had my father's notebooks. The goddess I met in the rift had given me the knowledge of someone in my age's grade level, which meant that if I wanted to really fit in, I would have to go to school. The joy I needed to learn as much as possible about this new world. She had also given me a little pocket money, but said that I would need to find a decent job if I needed more. My new house was already set and paid off for everything, which made me question if the gods of my world were just and loved to fuck with my life. Ever since Sakura-chan's death a few months into the war, I had become bitter, and swore a lot more than I used to. I drifted away from my friends more and more, enshrouding myself within a haze of missions and the battlefield. I should have done more, though they are dead now. I should let myself grieve, though I would wait until I reached my new house. I also checked my Umbu issue pouch for Kakashi's scrolls. The legend of 1,000 jutsu was incorrect. He actually knew of more than that. If I trained enough in control, I wouldn't need to use jutsu, just raw manipulation. And so, I set forth. First to get some shaded goggles, and then for my new home. My black coat flapping in the wind as I leapt from rooftop to rooftop. My Umbu grade armor embracing me like a secure shield for my torso. I would need to forge a new life, so these would be sealed in my Umbu tattoo, as well as my headband. It was nearly a month later, when I found a somewhat decent school to go to. Near the end of August, I enrolled. I kept quiet, only spoke when spoken to. I was surprised that I could pick up information as quick as a Sharingan could copy jutsu. In physical education, I beat everyone. I wasn't surprised by that. When the martial arts classes began for the year, I beat everyone. The instructors and the members were nearly gaping as I took on Busujima Siko, Miyamoto Rei, and Igu Hisashi. All at once. The battle wasn't as long as I hoped it would be. I decided to first take out the spear user Rei-san, followed by Siko-san. They were good, I'll give them. But without the speed and strength given by use of chakra, they were nothing more than trained civilians. Although Siko-san was the best of the three. I could feel a small amount of darkness in her. I danced with the three, as I can only call it that. Rei would try her damnedest to impale me with her wooden sparring spear. I knocked her out after a minute of dancing around her strikes. I would have turned on Siko with my own boken. But Hisashi-san was enraged. I could tell he wanted to date her, though she seemed too depressed for romance. As he came at me, I threw my boken into the air. He was distracted, and I only slammed 2 fingers into his chest and then threw him out of the field, before grabbing my boken as it fell right behind me. I then turned to Siko-san. My orange goggles glinted in the light. Our dance was slightly longer than with Rei-san. Before we began, I finally spoke. I can see it, you know. The small speck of darkness in you, Siko-san. She seemed to freeze for a moment, before tightening her grip on her own boken. I know, Siko-san. But yours doesn't even compare to my void. Hundreds are gone by my hands. And thousands I lead to the abyss. I then reversed my grip on the boken. My left hand in front, palm facing her, and my boken diagonally across my back. The grip at my waist, and the tip above my left shoulder. We waited for a signal, though I could see fear in her eyes. My face was apathetic, and I decided to dance near her level. To test her skill. A leaf from the trees blew in between where we stood. As it hit the ground, we shot at each other, our boken trailing behind us. I decided to use something similar to Bai's style, though I only used one weapon. She could barely keep up with my movements. The entire class was wide-eyed watching us. They were gaping at me, I knew. Who could do the things I was showing in a real match anyways? As we passed by the boken rack, I kicked up 6 more, and mimicked Karai Bai completely. I knew that I practically rendered everyone watching into a dumb state. It was over after a minute of doing so. Siko-san was on the ground and her bokken was in paces. She had tried to block my last attack. She was bruised on her arms and legs after my impromptu display. I then turned to walk away, but I stopped and said over my shoulder, "A good match, Siko-san. If you ever want to talk about your troubles, just say so. You as well, Rei-san." I then left. I didn't know why I said that to them. Maybe it was because I could feel their darkness, even though it was small, or it might have been something else. I didn't expect them to actually talk to me, though they did. For 2 months, I listened to their stories. I helped them overcome it somewhat. We became friends shortly after the first time they came to talk. I eventually learned about Siko's troubled past. How she enjoyed battle. I also noticed the slight blush she had when she would look at me. I knew her type. Always wanting to stay on top, but when someone stronger comes to beat them, they immediately develop an attraction. I wouldn't push her away, though I wasn't going to make a move so soon. I was still grieving after all. I learned from Rei why she was so down. Her childhood friend was killed by a drunk driver. His name was Takashi. It happened the day I arrived in this world. Which made me stop to think after she left. What were the circumstances that something like that would happen? It was simple. I was a better replacement. I knew that the gods would take a better pawn over a weaker one, and nearly forsake the castaway. I growled about that, as I sat on the roof. My eyes were nearly pulsing in disgust. Then I felt the two women approach. It was around 3:30 p.m. They had started to seek me out for company around this time of the day. They had to look for me for a few minutes before I called out to them, as I was on top of the observatory. We stayed there for near an hour, talking and watching the city. I knew that they wanted to know of my past. I couldn't give them the truth yet, so I only gave a few half-truths. I told them that my family were a warrior clan, and that we made our home to the north. I said that my village was small, compared to Tokunosu, which I knew wasn't a lie. I said that the village was prosperous, though it all ended a few months before my arrival. I said that a Yakuza group wiped out everyone else, as I had been hunting that day. It was partly true, as most of the shinobi villages considered the Akatsuki a group of criminals. They were criminals. And the part about my village being wiped out was true. With the rise of the imperfect Jubi, most of the major cities had been wiped out. As well as most, if not all, of the shinobi that fought it. I had gained my Rinnegan fully just a while after that. My so-called best friend, Sasuke, killed 2 of the women I had loved. The other that I had fallen for in the war were also taken. All 3 either by my old teammate, or by the resurrected Madara. I was afraid to let these 2 in, plus another girl I had met. Saya Takagi, the daughter of Lord Takagi. I had read a little about him, though I can't really say what type of man he is as I had only met him once. Saya is a smart girl, and she hides behind a mask of arrogance through her intelligence. She is a lot like Sakura, and every time I see her, or the other 2, my heart feels elated, and in pain. Elated because I have fallen for all 3, yet in pain because they remind me of the people I lost. I would hold back from calling them Chan whenever I spoke to them. It was getting harder to control my emotions around them. I knew that one day I would break. I discovered something that pissed me off, around the middle of December. I was immortal. My eyes, mixed with finally absorbing Kurama, had turned me into something that could not die. My ki burst forth that night. All of the city had frozen when I nearly screamed in a rage at the heavens. I forced myself to calm down when Kami showed up. She explained that although it was necessary, it still pained her that I would never know the embrace of death. She also decided to break a few rules, and told me that if I found any lovers, I could bind them to my own life force, making them live as long as I would eternally. I still hated it, as she had to explain that any children I had would never be able to live forever. I hated that I was such an important piece in a game. All of the gods were playing with me, and I wanted nothing more than to tear their heads off. As she left, I put her in tears with my angry words. I never knew that Kami-sama herself was so in tune with humanity. I would apologize later, as I was too enraged to care at the moment. It wasn't like I hated this new world, just most of the people in it. Saya had come to see me one day, the middle of February, and she was in tears. It was near lunch break. Her father and mother were still the same. Never around much to care for her, and always thinking that she could make decisions for herself. I held her as she cried. She was wearing glasses that day, and I found her more beautiful with them on. I had to stop such thoughts, as I hated to see a woman cry. She sobbed and almost yelled that no one loved her. I stopped her by chastely kissing her lips. Then I whispered to her, "Don't you ever say such things again, Saya-chan. Someone does love you." I should know. She stared into my goggles, looking for any hint of deceit. I didn't plan on letting her know that I loved her so soon. I also didn't want to go out with her, as that would crush the other 2. And I told her so, that even though I was in love, I couldn't hurt Rei-chan or Siko-chan. She somehow understood, and promised that she wouldn't say anything. I didn't want to make her cry, so I kissed her forehead and asked her to wait for me. To let me figure things out. She agreed, and I could tell that her heart wasn't as burdened now. She was a smart girl, and I could tell that she would be one of the ones to survive anything that happens to this world. She had a different kind of strength. She put on a mask in front of others, but Siko-chan, Rei-chan, and I had seen through it. She was just a hurting teen, in a cold world. As the month before the fated day came to a close, I had gotten closer to the three. I was torn. I wouldn't take any of them out on dates, as that would hurt the others. I found myself staying up late near every night. I couldn't really understand why both my heart and mind was torn. If we were in Konoha, I could have had all three. Alas, this city didn't have a CRA, and polygamy was not only highly frowned upon, but also illegal damn near everywhere. The day before the world ended, I had stayed up late again. I knew something would happen, and I hardened my resolve. If the world were to suddenly erupt in chaos, I would protect Rei-chan, Siko-chan, and Saya-chan. I would love them, if they would have me. The next day, the world went to hell. This is how my new world ends. Not with a bang, but a near silent whimper. Chapter 1, Spring of the Dead, and Escape from the Dead PT. It was a nice day at Fujimi High School Academy in the city of Tokunosu, Japan. The school had a warm atmosphere surrounding it. The school year was almost over. Many of the students were laughing and conversing as they walked to their next classes. All but one. A blonde-haired 18-year-old stood on top of the school's roof. He was not wearing the school uniform today. He wore a black high-collared Haori coat with red flames on the bottom and a purple bullseye on the back. The circle possessed 6 rings each with 6 comma marks on the rings, and a single pitch black circle in the center. Below that he wore a black muscle shirt and black karate GI pants. Black combat boots, black fingerless gloves, and orange biker goggles finished his outfit. His goggled gaze was currently watching the school's gate. His posture was like a soldier's, and the air around him was tense. He seemed to be waiting for something to happen, and most of the students had stayed away from him that day. Even the teachers were wary of him right now, though 3 teenage-age girls were not so frightened. Busuja Masiko, Miyamoto Rei, and Takagi Saya. It was nearing the end of lunch break, and all 3 had tried to get him to come back to class. The 3 girls were perplexed by his statuesque vigil, as he continued to stare out at the gates. The bell rang, signifying that break was over. And yet they could not get him to move, even trying to force him to. As they turned to head back in, he spoke in a voice that was colder than ice. They turned to see what he was looking at, puzzled by his proclamation, and saw a single person walking into the gate. As though the man was blind and could not feel that a barrier was in front of him. Naruto-kun? Rei asked, wondering what he was talking about. All 3 did. He looked over his shoulder and spoke. Bear witness to the beginning of the end. He then looked back as a few teachers walked up to the gate. Many will perish this day. I, however, plan on keeping us alive. I hope to find as many survivors as possible. He then jumped onto the rail and spoke to the 3 young women. Get to Marikawa's office. Wait for me there, and be prepared to kill, for if you are not, you will become like them. He then leapt off of the roof. They weren't afraid, as they had seen him do such before. He never explained how he could survive a fall from so high, with his bones still intact. They nodded to each other and left the roof, heading for the nurse's office. All 3 were wondering what he was talking about. Naruto appeared before the now undead gym teacher, just before Kyoko could reach him. The other teachers gasped as he picked Teshima up by the top of his skull. The undead gym teacher tried to bite the blonde, but was thrown over the gate. Impacting the ground head first, Teshima then stopped moving, as his neck was snapped. Naruto turned just as Kyoko was grabbed by another undead. Her shriek was cut off by Naruto grabbing the undead and throwing it into the wall behind him. Grabbing Kyoko, Naruto then leapt up to the roof as chaos finally broke out. It had happened all too fast for the beautiful teacher. One moment she was going to help her friend after he had been injured, then she was grabbed by someone who smelled, the next she was standing on the roof next to Naruto. She blushed slightly, as she had secretly thought he was a handsome young man. Said person turned to her. Ms. Hayashi, are you alright? She shook her head to clear her confusion, and turned to reply. Kami, his voice as she blushed even more, though she answered. Hi. Arigato Naruto. He nodded to her, his goggled gaze seemed to pierce into her soul. She hated that he wore such things. Then again, a lot of people hated it, and many were unnerved. He then spoke again. We need to get to the nurse's office. If we are to survive, we will need a medic. She nodded, and started to follow him, before she remembered a student she had been trying to help lately. Wait. Naruto-kun, I beg you. Please find Ms. Miku. She is a student that I have been trying to help. Naruto turned to look at Kyoko, and nodded. I will find her, Ms. Hayashi. The dark redhead smiled. Arigato gozaimasu. "If you can save her, I will do anything for you." She couldn't see if he caught on to her meaning, though she did see him stiffen a little, before he relaxed and continued on. She followed, knowing that he would be able to protect her. She had seen his records after all. Though little did she know that the records could never match up to his true abilities. Mikiyuki was hiding in the office of the woman who saved her almost a year ago. She hated Tsunoda and Shido, for they had tried to ruin her self-confidence and nearly raped her. If it weren't for Hayashi Kyoko, she would be ruined. Chaos was spreading through the academy like wildfire. People were eating each other, and like in a horror movie, the dead did not stay down. She hoped that Ms. Hayashi was alright, and not one of those things. She silently cried as she heard the screams and the groaning noises made by those that fell, yet returned. She hid inside of the closet and tried to keep quiet. Her eyes were wide as she heard more of the groans that she knew were getting closer. She also had heard the sounds of people trying to run away, and some that tried to fight. She listened as the screams became fewer and longer in between. She was nearly panicking until she heard a voice. It was a voice she had listened to before, one that made her heart flutter, though she was too shy to approach the speaker. Fall to pieces, she then heard what sounded like a whistling in front of the office, and then thuds, as though something was falling and impacting the ground lightly. She waited as the sounds went out, and then heard the voice of Hayashi Kyoko. "Naruto-kun, that was amazing. Come on, my office is up here." She breathed a sigh of relief, and thanked whatever deity that had kept them alive. She opened the closet door slowly and waited for the two. She kept the bat that she had found off of one of them, held tightly to her chest. The door opened and her tears started anew, though they were now in joy. In the door stood Hayashi Kyoko, and with her was Uzumaki Naruto wielding a katana. She gasped at him. He stood in between the office and a bloody hallway. Corpses that were sliced and in pieces littered the hall, and small flames were dancing on each one. The light from the flames cast him in an orange and somewhat hellish glow. He turned as Kyoko shouted to her. "Yuki-chan!" The excited teacher rushed forward and embraced her. Naruto just gazed at the two before speaking. "We need to get to Ms. Marikawa's office. Grab what you need, and let's go." He then turned as another one of them appeared around a corner. His arm snapped forward, releasing a knife. The knife flew straight and pierced the thing in its skull. Yuki gasped again. That throw was nearly 50 feet, and to hit with such accuracy without even appearing to try. She blushed as he turned back to them. "Please hurry, we don't have a lot of time." The two ladies nodded, and hustled to grab what they could. "We will have to be quick and silent. Make as little noise as possible while moving." His voice was authoritative, and both of them were a little turned on by it, though they nodded and followed him down the hallway, heading to the school nurse's office. Shizuka had woke up when the school announcement system went off, though she had been groggy, and unable to catch all of it in her sleep-addled mind. She only really woke up when Rei, Siko, and Saya burst through her office door. The three had been panting, as though they had run a few miles. As soon as they had caught their breath, they immediately rushed her to pack as many supplies as she could carry. She didn't understand what was going on, though she knew it was important. Shortly after, she could finally hear it. The sounds of flesh being torn, and of moans and screams. She commented that it sounded like a movie she once watched. Saya had to correct her about the director's name of the film. Her intern was out sick today, and she had been busier than usual before all of this started. She wondered why the police were not here. She just continued to pack things instead of dwelling on it too much. "We still have to wait for Naruto-kun," Saya said as she watched another student be gorged upon by the things. Rei nodded and watched out of the door, staying quiet. Siko looked out the window and watched as more students fell in the sports yard. Shizuka just looked at the three, and then watched as blood shot across the office's hallway window. Siko kept her bakin ready, while Rei held a broken mop handle. Saya was unarmed. Her and Shizuka had never fought before. They would rely on the other two for combat. Naruto stared at the two women he was escorting for a moment, as they quietly walked through the halls. He was still a little nervous about Kyoko. He never would have thought that someone would claim they'd do anything for him, just because he still had a small hero complex. Though his visage suggested nothing. He knew that no one in his world would say something like that, and mean it. He could tell that the teacher would actually do anything. He had studied a little psychology while in the war. People would do just about anything when in a state of heightened emotions. That was why he learned to control his own, back when he lost Sakura. Though that didn't stop him from feeling. He was slightly weary of the two. He could smell their fear, and their arousal of him. He could also hear their heartbeats. They were more calm now. Almost like they knew they were safe. Of course he would still protect them, he would protect all in his care. He couldn't stop himself from doing that. He would kill, as he had done so before, and in this state of anarchy people would do anything to survive. Many would go insane, and attack others. He understood what fear could do to a person's mind. He had seen it in the war. When one becomes so afraid that fear is no longer the correct term, people could be pushed to do anything. Slaughter, rape, even suicide. These were some of the things he had seen. The Fourth Great Ninja War was the worst. Not even the clan wars had generated so much fear. He knew that the only thing that had been as bad was the crusade against the 10 Tails. Back when the sage became a worshipped man. Almost like the Christ, Jesus. He couldn't really say, as he was not around at that time. He nearly sighed as he watched the two women try to stay as quiet as possible. They would often look back to make sure he was still there. Yuki had complained that he was too quiet like a ghost. He laughed inwardly, as he used to be afraid of such things. He had to admit, being a true shinobi was like being a ghost. He really matured when he had been in Umbu. He felt a small sense of nostalgia, missing his old squad. He really missed Yugao too. The woman who had taught him a lot, and had also been the one to take his virginity. He felt that familiar pain of loss for a brief moment, before focusing on another group of them. He wanted to call them zombies, though that would sound too silly. He directed the two ladies to go around the group. They would arrive at Shizuka's office soon. This is going to be a pain I don't want to take too long. I'll have to call for my ride. I don't think I can take too many people though, damn. He released a breath from his nose that was only slightly more labored than normal. He hated that he was never able to finish his plans for a mobile fortress. They continued traversing the halls. Kota ducked down, holding his modded nail gun. He had been lucky to find it. His bag carried a surplus of nails. Looking around a corner at a group of them, he took aim. Hitting all of them with a nail to the head, he slowly made his way down the hall. He paused as he heard what sounded like meat hitting the ground. He whipped around a corner, pointing his weapon at the noise, only to see his blonde friend sweeping through a small group with a katana. He also noticed the two women with him. Naruto. He spoke out as the blonde finished impaling a creature's face. Kota, it's good to see you made it. Come, we are heading to the nurse's office. The secret shinobi spoke, his voice like a general's in authority. The slightly heavy-set marksman nodded, then checked his ammo. All right, let's go. Kota was glad he had found Naruto, whom he was very loyal to. Naruto had saved him from Shido's group of bullies a few months before, and immediately befriended him. He was glad that the man who saved him survived. The group of now 4 people moved down the next few halls. Shizuka's office was just ahead. Saya suddenly gasped as blood flew across the hall's window. What the hell? The others approached the window, and saw around 5 heads fly across their vision. Looking to the left, they saw their favored blonde, calmly walking towards the office with 3 others. Naruto-kun! They nearly shouted as he opened the door, though paused at his visage. He was standing as though he were in complete control, and appeared as cold as stone. His voice suddenly barked out. Keep it down. These creatures react only to sound. They could feel the aura around him, and it felt like looking at a seasoned war veteran. He then spoke in a more concerned tone. Are you all safe? They nodded, though Siko and Rei had a little blood on their school outfits. It wasn't their own. He glanced at all 4 of them, before seeming to relax a little. He then turned to Shizuka. Dr. Murikawa. I am afraid that we are no longer safe here, as such we will be taking you to safety. We will first head to the faculty room, and assess the school's grounds for a safe path out. If we cannot find a vehicle of decent size for our group, then I will call in my own. The others had gasped, as he hardly ever spoke so much. Rei, Siko, and Saya blushed at hearing his voice. Then again, most females did that around him. His voice wasn't as gruff as his younger years, sounding more like his father. Though they wouldn't know that. Shizuka almost sighed, she always liked listening to him speak. Though they all had the sense to nod. He paused for but a second, and sighed. We might as well rest a moment, the halls are being flooded by these things. They all agreed to rest for half an hour, before closing the door. After 30 minutes, they started to move again. Remember that these things are blind, and cannot feel. They only react to sound. So move as quietly as possible. Naruto said as they made their way towards the faculty room. Shizuka, Kyoko, and Yuki standing in the middle of a circular formation. Kota, Rei, Siko, and Saya surrounding them with Naruto in the front. All of them nodded, and continued to trudge down the halls. They hadn't encountered any of them since leaving Shizuka's office. Though they could hear them in other areas. There was blood and paces of people everywhere. All but Naruto, and Siko, was having trouble keeping their lunches down. Naruto stopped for a moment, and looked at the wall on his left. Damn it, I can't help everybody, I cannot afford to showcase too much of my abilities. He turned his gaze away from the sounds of distant fighting. His sense of hearing catching many other noises that the others wouldn't be able to pick up, unless they were closer. I will only go all out if the situation calls for it. He almost sighed again, and continued walking. All of the ladies were watching him when he stopped, As he frowned, they wondered what was going on in his head. Saya was wishing to know his thoughts the most. Having been hailed as a genius, she really wanted to know what was going through the young enigma's mind. He had the highest records after all. He was just as smart, if not smarter than her. He was also the strongest student in the school. He had interested her ever since he got a perfect score on a test the school did every November. She had also watched him one day as he was working out, up on the roof. He appeared to have this drive, and she was finding herself attracted. She had one day decided to talk to him, just after winter break. They had become friends after that, and had some very intellectual conversations. As time wore on, she found herself getting enamored by him. She wanted to see his eyes too. Everyone wanted to see his eyes, though he never took his goggles off. She blushed as she realized that they had reached the faculty room, though it had more than a few of them in it. Naruto stepped forth and rushed at a speed that seemed to be a little faster than a professional runner's. He took them out methodically, and was quick to do so, though she also noticed how he produced no sound when he rushed. His feet were as silent as a grave's. As the television was broadcasting the news, Naruto gazed out into the courtyard. He had already known that getting to the bus would not be the best bet. He stayed silent as the others thought about making a run for the bus. However, he knew it wouldn't work. The bus would be too cramped for all of them, and he could sense Shido with a few students already heading there. He knew that his own group could get there first, though he also knew that if Shido's group were to arrive, they would have too many people on board. He then pulled his cell out of his pocket and dialed a specific number. Ray saw this and commented, "Naruto-kun, cell phones don't seem to be working. Who are you trying to call?" Naruto stayed silent, and then spoke into his phone. "Hanzo-san. Bring the reckoning. I am at Fujimi High School." He then hung up, and turned around to the others. "I have a vehicle on the way. It is large enough for all of us. However, it will be some time before it arrives. So I suggest we all wait here." He then turned back to the window. Ray was a little dumbstruck, as hers and Shizuka's phones didn't seem to be working right now. She then took hers out, and noticed there was still no service. Narrowing her eyes for a second, she asked her crush, "Naruto-kun, may I borrow your phone?" She then looked up to see his phone flying towards her. So she caught it, and gasped, "This is Naruto-kun, how did you get one of these?" The blonde just kept staring out the window, though answered, "You don't want to know, Ray-chan." His phone was a state-of-the-art new model. One that wasn't supposed to be out for the common people. Said to have its own built-in cell tower. The chip was small though able to broadcast from nearly anywhere, and supposedly immune to electromagnetic interference. Said to be able to survive an EMP blast. These phones had only been given out to the Emperor's Royal Guard. Kota recognized it too. "Holy shit! That's a Hayabusa Guardian communication phone. Only people who have direct contact with, and are employed by the Emperor get one. Where did you get this, Naruto?" Naruto sighed at the gun otaku's question. He then turned to the group, and spoke. "I got it from the Emperor himself. If you need to use it, then do so. But keep the calls short. I don't need the guard hounding me about too much use." He then turned back to the window and waited. "And Hanzo, not the salamander. He is just a name I grabbed because I couldn't think of anything good. The Hayabusa Guardian communication phone is just a made-up thing. As for the Emperor, Japan's Emperor still has special guards even today. Much like the US President has the Secret Service. I'll throw in a flashback in another chapter about it later. Now back to the story. Though I will put the beginning in this one. The Hayabusa Guardians are just a thing I decided to throw in. That is what Naruto did to get money throughout the 9 months since his arrival. School would have went to summer break about a week after Z-Day. The others were impressed, and Kota looked at the blonde in awe. Very few got to be a part of the Hayabusa Guardians. They were like America's Secret Service agents, though not as large in numbers. They Brayfly wondered what this reckoning was, though didn't dwell on it too much. The sun was starting to descend, nearing the horizon. Ray thanked him for the use of a working phone, and tried to call her father again. She was ecstatic when she heard her father pick up. "To-san. It's Ray. Hi, I'm fine. Hi, we are in the school's faculty room. What? Alright, I'll be careful. Is Ka-san with you?" She listened to her father for a moment. The others were somewhat glad that she got a hold of her dad. "Okay, I love you too, bye." She hung up and sighed in relief, before handing the phone to the group. For those that knew where their family was, they had similar conversations. Though Saya refused to make a call, and Shizuka said that she couldn't recall her friend's number. A few like Siko, and Kyoko, and Kota didn't have family in the country right now. Saya gave the phone back to Naruto when it was her turn. Naruto's eyes just gazed at her through his goggles, though he appeared to still be looking outside. "Are you sure you don't want to call your father?" At her nod he held his hand out, receiving the phone. "We better head out soon, our ride is coming." He then turned to the others. "I will warn you now, we will have to head towards the back of the school. In order to get evac, I had to set a certain rendezvous point some time ago. Remember, as long as we are quiet we should be fine. The best bet to get there would be either through hallway 16 on the 3rd floor, or from the roof. He paused as they all nodded, looking at him as if he were their leader. If we decide to take the roof, then we will have to get up there from either the halls or a window. Make your choices. Though we will remain as a group, and I will not leave any of you behind. He then turned back to the window. They all were about to huddle before Kota asked, Naruto, how can we get to the roof from a window? The only fire ladders are on the opposite side of the building. They looked to the blonde, also wondering. They then saw his reflection glimmer, and could see his smirking grin. He chuckled before replying. There are many ways for one to scale a wall. I happen to know the best way. They could hear his amusement, as well as a sense of sarcastic nostalgia, all rolled into a cold tone. They all shivered as they heard it. The best part is that none of them will be able to follow. They then watched as he looked down towards the school entrance. He thought of the day when he first became a guardian. Flashback 8 months before Z-Day. Uzumaki-san, you have proven yourself a trustworthy and valiant recruit. Your knowledge and skills have been seen by His Highness, and you are hereby offered a position within the Hayabusa Guard. Will you accept this new role? The voice of the Emperor's advisor asked. The other 46 guardians watched from a balcony above. Naruto bowed to the tent that the esteemed ruler of Japan sat in. I will take this opportunity that you have offered, Your Highness. My life is yours. The advisor would have finished speaking, but was cut off by an elderly voice, coming from within the small red and gold tent. Naruto-kun, why do you say such a thing? The advisor bowed as he stepped away so the Emperor could see the young blonde. Naruto opened his eyes and looked up to the man. His goggles were draped around his neck. The Emperor gasped upon seeing his eyes. Lord, I am a shinobi. I am supposed to be a weapon. If no one can make use of my abilities, then what purpose do I have to remain existing? The other guardians felt uncomfortable as they heard the icy tone. Since they could not see his eyes, they didn't know why the Emperor gasped. And so you are, Naruto-kun, just remember you are still a person. From this day forth, you shall be known as a Hayabusa Guardian. You are the 47th of my elite royal guard. Naruto bowed once more to the elder man, then stepped back and turned. Putting his goggles back on. He stopped as the others came to congratulate him, including one Takagi Soichiro. It would be the only time they would meet, until a fated day came. Flashback end. Naruto continued to gaze out. He then saw a small group of survivors rush towards the bus. Shido was in the lead. He chuckled slightly, as the man would be unable to escape. He felt sad for the students though, but didn't think any more about them. He watched as all but Shido was grabbed by the creatures. The man didn't even turn to help. Naruto sighed, and reached into his coat, pulling forth a customized handgun that was black, with a picture of a red-haired woman on the grip. On the side of the barrel was a name engraved in gold. Kushina. The gun rested in his left hand. The others gasped as he pointed out the window. Kota was about to go on one of his fan-like moments, but Naruto's voice stopped everyone cold. Shido, you fool. This world will be better off without you, Snake. He then pulled the trigger. The shot was as silent as a whisper. The glass then shattered and Kota saw the snake-like teacher's head explode. The others ran to look out the window and saw all the students Shido had being torn apart, along with the headless man. Blood staining the door of the bus. Naruto then turned to them. I will not tolerate abandonment. No one gets left behind. He then placed the gun back into his coat. They also caught glimpse of a silver twin gun, though couldn't see the name for it as it was holstered. The custom .50 Kleber handguns were named Minato and Kushina. Below the names was engraved the Will of Fire. Naruto then put his katana back into his left hand, his right sitting on the handle. Get ready, our ride will be here shortly. They had left the faculty room and decided to head to the nearby emergency stairway. Siko and Rei were walking on the left and right sides of the group. Kota at the back. Naruto stood in front, while the other three were in the middle. After making sure none of the creatures were in the stairway, they climbed to the roof. Naruto could hear the sirens and chaos that was further away outside. He didn't appear to be concerned, though inwardly he was livid at how this was playing out. He wondered about whether or not the Emperor was safe. With 45 of the Hayabusa around, he didn't worry too much. Only he and Lord Takagi were currently in Tokanosa City. He stopped for a second as he heard more screams. Damn it! This even worse than the Fourth Great Ninja War. At least very few civilians were targeted by the Uchiha. He then continued on, opening the roof access door. Outside of the door were quite a few of them. Rei suddenly froze as she saw one that she knew. Hisashi, the karate user, was missing his arm, and had quite a few holes in his school uniform. His intestines were hanging out, and half of his neck was missing. Tears started to run from her eyes. Naruto sensed it all and walked up to the undead man. He then looked back at her, And mouth I'm sorry, she gasped as Naruto's fist suddenly struck forth, caving in their friend's head. Her tears ran even faster, and she started to sob. He then turned to face the rest of them. May you all rest in peace, as I give your souls release from this hell. He then blurred away. The others wondered what happened, until they heard him call out. Judgment's call. They turned just as around 50 of the zombie-like things fell in paces, opening a path for them to run through. He then shouted, "Come on!" They then ran through, with Shizuka grabbing Rei. The surrounding creatures turned to the noise. Naruto then put himself in a stance to quick draw his blade. As soon as the others had passed him, he drew it, swung, and then sheathed his blade with a click. It only looked like a blur. Suddenly a wall of darkness appeared, as wide as the roof, and shot forth through the creatures. All of them were diced to ribbons. The others didn't even turn to see the devastation. He then whispered into the wind. Judgment cut. Turning to follow the others, he sighed. I'll need to limit myself. I don't want them all afraid of me. He then caught up to them. They continued running to the back of the building. As they approached, they heard what sounded like a diesel engine. Chapter 2, Escape of the Dead PT-2, and Past of the Ninja PT-1. Last episode. Naruto then put himself in a stance to quick draw his blade. As soon as the others had passed him, he drew it, swung, and then sheathed his blade with a click. It only looked like a blur. Suddenly a wall of darkness appeared, as wide as the roof, and shot forth through the creatures. All of them were diced to ribbons. The others didn't even turn to see the devastation. He then whispered into the wind. Judgment cut. Turning to follow the others, he sighed. I'll need to limit myself. I don't want them all afraid of me. He then caught up to them. They continued running to the back of the building. As they approached, they heard what sounded like a diesel engine. Now. Right on time, Naruto said as they approached the edge of the roof. The others gasped, seeing his vehicle. A white truck, in the style of an old American ground troop carrier. Though this had a box trailer instead of a flatbed. It was around 48 feet in length, and 16 wide. There were red swirl-like patterns on the sides, and a mounted .50 cal LMG turret on a top platform. There was also a soldier on the turret, gunning down as many undead as possible, though the shots were silent. They marveled the fact that Naruto had such a vehicle. Normally the trucks were green, and had a tarp covering that acted as a tent on a flatbed. They could also see a mechanism running along the bottom, and around the edges. The engine was producing a low-pitched rumble. Koda gasped. That looks like a USMC M923, they heard Naruto chuckle. That, my military otaku friend, is Death's Reckoning. It essentially is an M923, though it is nearly twice the size and weight. It is heavily modified. The others looked at the two. Saya let loose a confirmation. The United States Marine Corps Model 923 utility truck. They were mainly used to transport supplies or troops. Used from 1987 until being modified in '99 for safety measures. Impressive truck, Naruto-kun. Naruto chuckled again. Wait until you see the inside, and its operating systems. He then turned to a scaffolding and walked towards it, motioning for the others to follow. The engine is a modified remake of the A2 model, and the mech on the bottom is for water-based travel. The engine itself is modified for a very high MPG usage. That bad girl will consume 1 gallon of gas for every 400 miles, in city, with the 2 tanks carrying 80 gallons. He stepped onto the stairway and proceeded to tread down at a walking pace. On a highway, it'll max out at 550 miles per gallon, with a top speed of 95. When converted for aquatic travel, it uses around 450 to the gallon. Tires are suited for all terrain, though going uphill with its weight is a bitch. He stopped and pulled a pack of cigarettes out. Lighting one with a little Katan chakra, he then continued. It is a reliable vehicle, so long as we don't take a curve over 40. He then chuckled once more. There is more than that little gun on top, and the inside you will have your minds blown, he ended with a little amusement. And look it up. They are still used today. Though you won't find these mods on it. They followed him down. Due to the noise from Reckoning, they didn't have to worry about any of the undead for a little ways. Shizuka was frowning at him for smoking. You know those are bad for you, right, Naruto-kun? She asked him. He just laughed at her. Hanzo sighed as he sat behind the wheel of Death's Reckoning. He was an average-looking soldier, with standard black hair and eyes. Though he held a blazing flame in them. He had a scar running right next to his left eye, a jagged strip of hardened skin. Waiting for his commanding officer. Damn slave driver, more like constantly drilling us in all types of apocalyptic scenarios. Though it did prepare us for something similar to this, he sighed again as he heard the gunner laughing. Shut up, Jack! He screamed at the man above. The laughing only got louder. Hanzo then spotted the blonde hair finally walking through the sports yard. About damn time, look at him, so fucking calm. He then turned to look behind him at a purple-haired woman. Rika, they're on their way. Get the back hatch open and cover. She nodded, and walked through the door leading from the cabin to the mini barracks that outwardly looked like a trailer. They were the only ones in it currently, and it could hold around 20 people. Commander Uzumaki, how he could increase space with a few written words I will never know. He sighed again. Like some damn kind of sorcery. His thoughts then turned to his betrothed, who was guarding the Emperor with the other 45 Hayabusa members. Minami Rika chuckled as she heard their gunner laughing still. Jack was just a nickname, only called that because no one but their commander knew who he really was. The gunner kept his entire head wrapped in bandages, and his eyes were a little on the crazy side. She walked through 3 rooms towards the back hatch, to let the survivors in. One room held 2 spare vehicles. A standard 4-person ATV, and a tarped custom bike. The bike was the commander's, and was completely customized. She grabbed a standard DMR, preferring the sleek rifle over an automatic. She also grabbed a Glock .9mm, pulling 4 clips for each. She then opened the hatch, and lowered a ramp for the group, readying her rifle to provide cover for her commander, though she knew he wouldn't need it. And major deviation here, Rika is with the group. Shizuka will be happy. Naruto's gaze hardened behind his goggles. So many casualties. When I find the source of this, there will be hell to pay. He noticed the ramp lowering to allow them inside, and Rika picking off a few of them with the DMR. He noticed Kota spying the woman holding the gun. He could also see the otaku's eyes gleam at the weapon. They'll get along well. He then motioned for the group to run to the truck. Can't call it a truck, more like a mobile barracks. He also failed to remember the word armory. The group would be mind blown at the interior. He proceeded to run right behind them, slashing through any of the creatures that got too close. Rei was still in turmoil about Hisashi. He would comfort her on the reckoning. He also noticed Shizuka seeming happy at the sight of Rika. Plan: escape Fujimi Academy. Select a suitable location for a base, preferentially permanent. Establish comms with Lord Takagi and command center. Locate family members of group. He knew it would be more difficult than that, though it would have to do. We will need a place that can give us essential supplies. My personal base would be ideal, though it will take time to get there. Lord Takagi must be contacted first, so a temp base will have to do. The group made it, and almost sprinted up the ramp. Naruto barked out as he pushed the button to close the hatch. Get us out of here, Hanzo. They then lurched a little as reckoning started to move, going from 0 to 50 in just a few seconds. The hatch closed, and the group sighed in relief. Shizuka then shouted in joy. Rika-chan! Flying forward to hug the markswoman, and toppling the 2 over in the process. Naruto turned to Rei, and was instantly by her side, holding her as she finally began to sob, whispering words that he hoped would calm her down. They heard distant shouting coming through the door leading to another room. Saya gazed around the one they were in, and froze. Now I know the damn thing isn't this big outside. She turned a curious gaze around the room, and then to Naruto. Before she could ask, he already answered. Fuinjutsu. Also known as sealing arts. I don't have the time to really explain. The seals I have placed along the interior of Death's Reckoning have allowed me to increase the space within the walls. Essentially, I have created a pocket dimension. He then turned back to Rei. Saya thought hard about what was said. That kind of crap is only in manga, or is considered magic. No one has ever proven that magic exists. Naruto chuckled, before letting Shizuka take Rei. Within every living being, there is a source of energy. Turning to look at the rest of the group, he decided to give a small lecture. Where I hail from, we call this energy chakra. However, it is not just a single source. Chakra is made up of 2 parts: physical energy and spiritual energy. The latter is also considered mental energy. Pausing to make sure they were all listening, he continued. Physical energy is acquired by partaking in physical exercise, eating a balanced diet, etc. While mental/spiritual energy is acquired by stimulating the mind, or from experience. He then looked straight at Saya. You, Saya-chan, would have a high mental energy count by how often you use your intelligence, while someone like Rei would have a higher physical count. He then paused, to make sure they were following. Unlocking the ability to use chakra, one can basically use it to do many things that most people consider unnatural, such as breathing fire, controlling wind, water, and earth, encasing oneself in lightning, walking on water, and he then placed his feet on the wall, walking up as though it were the ground. Even walking on vertical surfaces, and the ceiling as well. The others watched, transfixed as a small amount of electricity was running across his fingertips. This is just the surface of the ocean of things that can be done. Chakra can also be used internally, meaning one can enhance their own body. Muscle strength, bone density, speed, etc. He then flipped down in front of Saya. For most people on this planet, it takes decades to scratch the surface. The Shaolin monks use this energy to help enhance their cognitive thoughts, and in their martial arts. Where I am from, we We were trained to use the abilities I have shown, by the age of 13. Fuinjutsu is a lot like physics and algebra, using chakra and special kanji. The uses of sealing are impossible to fully figure out. The potential behind this art is almost, if not fully, infinite. He then turned to the others. I was trained from a very young age as a soldier. I was a shinobi. Kota then asked. Naruto, can you teach us how to do these things? Naruto sighed. I suppose it's possible, though your own chakra coils are nearing the point of being unable to expand. I may be able to get you to Michunin reserves. But beyond that I don't know. Forcing your coils to expand after your body has reached physical maturity would likely kill you. If you were younger, say around 12, then I could get you to Jounin, or even Satusa * reserves. And Satusa is the official class of the Sannin, and Kage, as said by the card game. Hiruzen, Minato, Jiraiya, Tsunade and all S ranks are in this category. It is why they are labeled as S-class in the bingo books. There is also SS and SSS. I have heard that there is also a K-class, which is said to be what Kagaya and the tailed beasts from 7 to 10 are at. Believed to be short for demigod status. The group were stunned. Rei, Siko, and Saya had never heard him say that before. To see that he had never told the full truth hurt them. Though Siko spoke. I understand. The way of the shinobi was outlawed, so it only makes sense that you would hide it. Naruto chuckled a little. I have read about your shinobi. But the lands I came from, you were either a shinobi or you were nothing of importance. Civilians and shinobi shared a symbiotic relationship. We protected them, and they provided us necessities. That was how the elemental nations were. There were far more shinobi than there were samurai. They all looked at him a little strangely. We were the main military forces, while your ninja were spies or assassins. Thieves or cutthroats. He turned away from them. We had more honor than yours did. The way he talked made it seem like he was the last of the others. Only the 3 girls knew that he was. Make yourselves comfortable. I will stay with Rei-chan. Rika saluted her commander and led the others to the bedding area. Naruto knelt beside Rei and softly gazed into her eyes. It's all right. I'll keep you safe. I will never leave you, and I will never die. I promise you, Rei-chan. He then picked her up, as she had fallen asleep, and he whispered into the empty room. As Shigeru, if he would have looked at her face, he'd have noticed a small smile from the sleeping girl. Hanzo grunted, having ran straight through the wall that he had the reckoning enter from. He spat his chew out the window. Bring it, undead fuckers. I'll run all your asses over, he said as he crushed a good number of the things. The radio was playing, though he paid it no mind. We'll need to find a place to set up a TV. Came the voice of Naruto after 20 minutes of driving. You know, I really don't like you right now, sir. Naruto just chuckled at the driver. You only say that because you lost quite a bit of money. Admit it, I was right. Hanzo grumbled at his commander after the blonde had said that. Well, we don't really need money now, right? Naruto sighed at the driver's question. Perhaps. So where to, sir? Naruto looked out at the chaos, contemplating. Best bet would be to cross the river and head to Tsuchiro Sands. Though it would take a while, and we need to get their family if possible. Hanzo nodded. So, 48th? Naruto nodded. Hanzo slowed the truck and turned right. Naruto then turned to head back into the barracks. Heading up the stairs to the 2nd floor. Jack. Ensure that our weapons system is online. We'll need it, along with anti-EMP measures. A confirmation sound came from the door he just passed. He then stepped into the main bedding room. Rika. Check our munitions, I want to know exactly what all we have. ASAP. The woman nodded, and headed towards the armory. Kota, you need a better gun than that nail shooter. Head down with Rika and procure a few arms for yourself. Kota got a glint in his eye, and shot up to follow the lady with the gun. Naruto then turned to the others. You all must be wondering how I could get such a nice vehicle, guns, and other equipment. I am not really allowed to divulge such information. The Hayabusa are just like the Secret Service of the US, though we take a more active role. He then turned, noticing that Rei had woke up. We will be heading towards Takagi Manor. I must ensure that the Emperor is safe, and receive orders. Saya looked a little down. Do not worry, Saya-chan. We will not stay there, and you may follow me if you so wish. She smiled, and nodded. Siko decided to speak. We will also have to find out what happened to everyone's family. Naruto nodded, and pulled a notebook out with a pen. Write the names down, and if you know where they are. We will then look for them as soon as I am done at Takagi Manor. The group nodded, and proceeded to do so. Naruto turned around, and left them to their own devices. Rika stared at the young heavier-than-normal guy. She watched as he ran around, looking at all the guns, and acting like a kid in a candy store with free candy. Watching him zip around like he was on a sugar rush, she chuckled a little. This must be Hirano Kota, just like the commander described. Her thoughts then turned to her friend, Shizuka. Thank Kami he was able to get to her. She giggled as she remembered that Shizuka had a crush on the blonde male. She then noticed that Kota had grabbed a few arms. A standard DMR, a .45 ACP 1911 model handgun, a compact .9mm Uzi, a SBZ 12-gauge riot shotgun, and a .357 lever-action rifle with a scope. He also adorned a BP vest and 3 pouches of ammo. It's like a dream come true, he shouted with stars in his eyes. Rika laughed again, and wrote down what all he had grabbed. She then went to check the inventory. Naruto sighed as 48th came into view. The original street name was changed, as a few years before, 48 people were killed by a 12-year-old girl. No one really knew why she had snapped, though he had a theory. Reports had stated that she was afflicted with something similar to rabies. Cause was unknown. Origins unknown. Along with a slight decomposure, and near rigor mortis that should have been the first sign. He sighed again, as he saw numerous amounts of the walking corpses. Hearing someone call to him, he turned and saw Jack. "Sup, boss?" Naruto nodded to the bandaged man. "Just wondering how this could happen, Jack. I hope to find the cause of this." The man nodded, and pulled a cigar out. Naruto had grabbed a cigarette as well, both lighting up. Reckoning was moving a little slower, due to the inactive vehicles littering the road. "So what's the story, boss? Where'd you find all the lovelies?" Naruto chuckled. "Watch it, Gunner, the boss doesn't need your advice on sex," Rika called out as she appeared in the extended cabin. Though it was more of a command bridge than anything else, and handed him the inventory report. Hanzo chuckled from the driver's seat. "Hey, I wasn't gonna say anything. I just asked a legitimate question." They all started laughing after that, though Naruto did not. "Still, we really need to get to Takagi Manor, and with the way things look we may have to go Aqua," Hanzo said. Naruto nodded, and sighed again. "This is a real pain in the ass." The others agreed with their commander. "This is either a really fucked up dream, or Naruto-kun is a fucking sorcerer," Saya grumbled. She had found her way to the medical area, Shizuka following. While the blonde gazed around at the equipment, Saya walked up to a bookshelf, gazing at all of the titles. Most in Japanese, while others were in English, and even German. All medical and training texts. Shizuka squealed seeing so many textbooks, and other med equipment. Much like Kota had been earlier, she ran around. Saya just stared at her, thinking she had lost it. "Okay," the rose-haired girl said, sweat dropping at the sight. She turned to leave, when a particular leather-bound book grabbed her attention. What could this be? Picking it up, she noticed that it was a journal. Opening to the first page, she gasped. Property of Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. She sat in a nearby chair, and began to read. November 28, 637 AFS. 3 months into the war. I have decided to keep a journal. Strange that I would do so in the middle of the 4th Great Ninja War. I am ecstatic. Sakura-chan has finally agreed to a date. It wasn't what I had planned when I asked. I had shouted the question on the battlefield. There were numerous amounts of white sets piled around, and many of our own comrades were dead or dying around us. At first, I didn't think she heard me. I was going to call out, but she rushed up and kissed me there. She had said okay. I then felt a sudden rush of energy, and I had gone into my Biju cloak. I was truly almost as fast as my father was, with his Haration. I ended that battle in just under 3 minutes. I hope that this will not turn out bad. December 23, 637 AFS. Nearly 4 months into SW4. This last month has been wonderful, despite the war. Sakura-chan and I are in the same squad. We spend our free time enjoying each other's company. She finally got me to give up on Sasuke. She made me promise that I wouldn't go after him anymore. He used to be like a brother to me, though his past put him onto a path of revenge and darkness. Even though I won't chase him anymore, I will still try to save him if I can. If the Night Aim's theory is correct, then I should be able to save his haunted soul. Sakura-chan wouldn't want me to take any risks though. I am happy right now. The girl I have loved since so long ago is finally returning my affections. Tomorrow I must head out to the front. Even though they don't want me out there. This war is pointless. Even if it started just to get Kurama from me. I won't let the fake Madara have him. January 3, 638 AFS. Bai was taken. He was swarmed by so many white Setsu, and they have taken the Hachibi. Octopops had helped me quite a bit. Bai taught me how to use his special sword style, and Octopops taught Kurama and I how to fully use our link. I am still crying about it. Sakura-chan tried to comfort me, though this wasn't as bad as when my godfather died. I still miss that old pervert. And even Tsunade Bachan still misses him. She is currently back at the command center, helping keep the morale up. I plan on taking Sakura-chan out tomorrow. The Zetsu army are retreating for now, so we will have a few days before the fighting starts again. I will take her to the beach, as she likes to watch the sun rise and set from the shoreline. January 14th, 638 AFS. I am angered and depressed. 10 days ago, at the shore of Thunderclad Beach, Sasuke appeared. I tried to talk to him, though he placed a seal on me. Temporary paralysis, and Biju Chakra suppression, Sakura-chan tried to fight him. I could only watch helplessly, as he plunged his sword into her heart. That day, a part of me died. He had laughed and walked off, saying that I could now understand some of his pain. As the seal wore off, I rushed to her side. She was trying to keep herself from dying, though we both knew that she lacked the required chakra reserves to save herself. She told me that she loved me, and then passed. I screamed, and shouted into the heavens, holding her rapidly cooling body. I then allowed Kurama to take over my body. When I came to, there was a wasteland around me, so many white sets of corpses that I couldn't even begin to count. Sakura-chan was still in my arms. Then the rest of the squad appeared, asking what had happened, until they noticed who was in my arms. I vowed that day to kill Sasuke. I would do it with a cold smile on my face too. Saya closed the journal, noticing a few tears falling down her cheeks. She quickly looked to see if Shizuka was watching, only to see the blonde engrossed with an English book on certain herbs. She then pulled her glasses off and wiped her eyes. She put the journal in her bag, which she had kept with her, and stood up. She walked out of the medical bay, and proceeded to the bedding area. Naruto-kun was in a great war? Why is he hiding such vital information? Why did he leave this in there? And who the hell is Sakura? She would pore over the journal, and try to find anything else about the blonde. If she had to, she would ask him herself. She knew it was invasion of privacy, but she was truly curious, and worried about him. Rei awoke to the sight of Siko meditating, while Kyoko and Yuki were talking with a lot of excitement. She remembered where they were, and what all had happened. So it wasn't a dream. She pulled her knees to her chest, and wrapped her arms around them, burying her face as well. She silently cried. Hisashi, it's just like with Takashi, why did they have to die? Siko had noticed the silently crying form of Rei. She then turned to her, speaking in a soft tone as she approached the distraught young lady. Naruto-kun is currently talking to his crew members. He said he will be back shortly. Rei almost froze hearing that the blonde wasn't there, but relaxed as she heard his voice. And I have already returned. Rei shot up, and rushed to him, hugging him, and openly crying now. Please! Please, don't ever leave me, Naruto-kun! She shouted out, holding as tightly as she could, sobbing, and praying to any deity that he would never go. She then felt him wrap his arms around her. It's alright, Rei-chan. I won't leave. I will not ever leave, any of you. I promise. He whispered into her ear. He was then taken by surprise as she turned her head up and kissed him. The other three were surprised as well, and a little jealous. Though Yuki suddenly smirked, and leaned in to whisper to Kyoko. You know that there is no law anymore, right? Kyoko nodded. Then who would stop us all from taking him, or him from having multiple lovers? Yuki smiled as Kyoko's eyes widened, and she blushed at hearing such a thing. Siko heard the orange-haired beauty, and paused to really think about it. Clever girl. With an apocalypse going on, who would really care about simple laws? It is a new world after all. Besides, he is strong, and survival instincts would dictate to appease him. In order to stay in his protection, one would be willing to bed and give him offspring. She then turned back to the blonde. He had finally gotten the spearswoman to calm down. It's a good thing that he has a heart beneath that cold exterior. She then blushed a little at seeing the dazed look in Rei's eyes. Turning to the other three, Naruto spoke. We are heading down the infamous 48th Avenue. We will take this route to the river, and cross over. Heading first to the police station, then to Takagi Manor. After which, we will proceed to search for any of your family members, before heading to a retreat I have set up. Is this something you all are willing to comply with? As soon as he stopped speaking, Yuki jumped on him. Of course it is, Naruto-kun. She discreetly grinded her covered tunnel against his crotch, causing his breath to hitch. She then let go of him, turning to the others. Right, girls? They all nodded, not noticing Naruto grimace at her actions. Saya saw Naruto walk away from the others. She was about to follow when Rei appeared next to her. Still dazed, the spear user glanced at Saya. They both followed him, watching as he opened another door. He stepped through, though called to them. You may come in if you wish, girls. Both were surprised that he knew they were following him. Well, we weren't quiet about it, Saya whispered. The two followed him in. He was sitting behind a desk, with 2 chairs in front of it. Please, have a seat. The two did so as he started typing on a laptop. You are most likely wondering why I have been in school, while being a commanding officer in the Hayabusa 47, am I correct? Saya nodded, and was about to speak before he cut her off. You are also wondering about the journal. She gasped, feeling his gaze on her from behind the goggles. He chuckled at her. Surprised? I know where that book is at all times. I placed a Horatian writ on it. I can sense where all of those marks are. Truth be told, we would have been at Takagi Manor by now if I had one place there. Your father is a very prompt man. I doubt he would have allowed me to. He then stopped typing and turned to them. You may read it, all of you. But do not be surprised if you can't grasp everything in it. Within those pages are not only my past, but also every note about medical ninjutsu and poison antidote combinations Sakura-chan had. That is why it is in there. Sakura-chan was a medical genius, though she couldn't save herself from death. She lacked the chakra to do so. Saya nodded, while Ray looked with a little confusion. I don't mind any of you reading about my past, but I cannot speak of it right now. It is still painful. He then turned back to the laptop. You may go, Death's Reckoning is open to you all, there are no places you may not enter. But please knock when you try to come in here. I may have wanted to be Hokage once, but paperwork will always be a hassle, and I might be busy. The two nodded, sad that he would dismiss them like that. Just before walking out the door they heard him speak once more. I am sorry if I sounded cold, but you will find that in dire times such as this I will have to be most of the time. I will try not to sound so cold with you, but I am a commander. If I cannot set an example to my men, then my battalion would fall. He looked up at them, and smiled a little. I will see you all as soon as I am finished making this log on the creatures we are fighting. They smiled back at him, and left. Naruto then finished his work, and stood up. You may hate me after reading that journal, but I deserve it. He then left, heading for the command bridge. Lost in memories that he would rather not be in. Yuna, he whispered into the empty hallway. And so, the end is nigh. 'Twould seem that the gods are angry. A cold voice spoke. Standing atop the tallest building in Tokanosa City, the shadow of a man could be seen. He wore a black trench coat, with a strange-looking suit underneath. The suit looked like it was made of darkness, and was in the shape of muscles. Silver pieces were scattered around it. One around the crotch area, one covering the lower rib cage, and a small one going across the collarbone area. His hair was cut to a buzz style, and was ice blue. His eyes were a blood-like red. On his left hip was a revolver-looking handle. It was a long barrel .44 Magnum, that also carried a 2.5-foot-long blade. His eyes gazed down into the chaos of the city. He is here. I know it. He then jumped off, diving down through the air, and landing atop one of the undead. Crushing the heavyset thing, he pulled his weapon out, and began to paint the streets red with sword and bullet. I will find you, Uzumaki. I, Kishikaru Kagero, will find and end you. Rushing forth into the chaos, one could hear a strange laughter coming from the man. The 47th Hayabusa member, who was considered MIA. And the suit from Crisis Game series. The gunblade from Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children. With Squall's handle from 8 at a .44 mag style. Naruto flicked a cigarette off of the turret balcony. That felt like chakra, though not enough to really feel like a shinobi. What the hell is going on now? He looked behind Reckoning, off into the distance. I don't like this feeling. Hatred is in the air. He kept looking behind, until a voice interrupted him. Hey boss. Turning, he saw Rika. Yes, sniper? She sighed. He never called them by designated title, unless it was important. You alright? You seemed out of it in the hallway. Naruto sighed, looking back to the area he felt the chakra. I'm fine. Just remembering things. Rika's features softened. The crew had already read his journal. Naruto-kun, you shouldn't bottle those feelings up, otherwise you might snap someday. She said softly to her commander and secret crush. He remained silent. She sighed and turned to leave. You are right, Rika-chan. But I must still grieve for them, on my own time. Once we get back to Eden, I will try to let go. But I can't right now. She stopped for a moment, and her eyes began to water. Naruto-kun. Saya opened the journal again, turning to where she left off. She had the others from the group around her, all looking over her shoulder. He was in a war, and lost his girlfriend to death. The killer was someone he considered a brother. The journal was started 3 months into it, so we would have to ask him about before then. Her name was Sakura. He also said that her notes on everything medical are in the back of the journal. The others felt sad to hear that he had lost someone close to his heart. Even Shizuka was down, not even bothering about the medical notes. Yuki felt sorry for him, and guilty, while Rei gasped. Siko turned her eyes, and Kyoko felt a few tears fall. If he was in a war, then why haven't we heard about it? The last war was in Iraq, and he wouldn't have been old enough to fight. Kota asked. Saya shrugged. Even though her, Rei, and Siko knew that his village was wiped out, they never knew he was in a war. Let's find out. She then started to read out loud. February 23, 638 AFS. I have shrouded myself in the missions I am given. I joined the Umbu Corps 2 weeks ago. My field officer is the legendary Nico, Yuzuki Yugao, Konoha's top Kenjutsu mistress. I should have recognized her before we met. She used to watch over me when she was a genin. She also took the Sandame's missions for watching me until I joined the academy. I used to have a crush on her when I was 4. She was only 12 then. I couldn't bring myself to say much though. I was, and still am, hurting. My mask, when my Umbu mask is off, is no longer a stupid smile. I have become apathetic. I catch Yuzuki Taicho staring at me in worry. I have taken far more missions than the others in the past 2 weeks, compared to their few. I just tell them not to worry, as I am a Jinchuriki, I can handle it. My stamina will allow it. Kurama has been trying his damnedest to cheer me up. I keep telling him off too. If I don't keep myself occupied, then I will break. And that is the last thing the Shinobi Alliance needs, a broken weapon. March 2nd, 638 AFS. Yuzuki Taicho put my ass in the ground today. I had dismissed orders, she told me to take a break. When I said no, she kicked my ass. While I was on the floor battered, she leaned down and tore my kitsune mask off. She then slapped me, before bringing my head to her boss Sam. She whispered to me that it was alright to cry, and to take a little time off. I broke down in her arms. That was the first time I cried over the death of Sakura-chan. At least that I can still remember. I asked myself, what would she think of me if she could see this? I was beginning to walk the same path that the Uchiha does. Sakura-chan, will I be able to see you again one day? Do I even deserve to? Can I keep others from suffering like this, or will I continuously fail? Are you happy there, amongst the clouds, with your ancestors? I don't know why I ask these things. Maybe I am losing it. I've had to file for downtime, so that I can think. March 14th, 638 AFS. Nearly 5 months in. I am still 16, I will be until October. Today, Yuzuki Taicho stopped by while I was eating at Ichiraku's. She was wearing a civvy dress. She smiled and asked how I was doing. I told her that I felt a little better. She gazed into my eyes and said good. Then handed me a note. I looked at it to find her apartment number. When I turned to ask why she had given it to me, she answered that I needed to let loose and go drinking. She would take me to a bar near her place. I admit that I was always a little curious. Though with Kurama locked away in my gut, it would take a lot to get me tipsy. Maybe I will go, and I'll ask him to not clean my system of the alcohol. I thought for a few minutes. I agreed. She told me to be there by 1900 hours. March 15th, 638 AFS. Last night was a new experience. I had gotten Kurama to leave the alcohol in my system. Though I can still remember everything. I had to track Yuzuki Taicho down today, as I remembered that she kissed me last night. I was surprised when I remembered that. When we sat down in her living room, I told her about it. She apologized, and looked ashamed. I could never stand to see women cry, so I blurted out that it was alright. Because deep down I had enjoyed it. She brightened up after I assured her that I wasn't mad. She then hugged me, saying thank you over and over. I embraced her back, and listened as she cried in happiness. When she finally calmed down, I asked the first thing on my mind in that moment. She agreed to go on a date with me. April 9th, 638 AFS. These past few weeks have healed me. Yugao-chan has helped me, both emotionally and in training. She had me make around 30 kage bunshin and taught them all the katos of her personal sword style. Every hour I would dispel them and make more, gaining the muscle memory of sword forms. It was like my time with Karabi. The style she taught me wasn't the crescent moon dance. She said that she wasn't as good in it as her ex was. She taught me the Yami no Mai, the dance of darkness. She said that it was a special kenjutsu style that came from Yami no Kuni, where her family came from. I am happy again. We have gone on more dates, and every now and then I catch her watching me train. Kurama says that looks at me with lust. But I see more than that in her eyes. April 18th, 638 AFS. I am excited and nervous. Yugaheim is sleeping on my bed. The evidence that last night really happened stains the sheets. We made love last night. It was my first time, and I now know that she was also a virgin. It was the most amazing experience I've ever had. She is laying there still nude. And I can't help but admire her beauty. Her purple hair is scattered around her head, like a halo. I hope I didn't hurt her too bad, or that it was enjoyable for her. I am in awe at her angelic beauty. My little friend is standing at attention, but I can't bring myself to care about that right now. I can sense that she will awake soon, so I will prepare breakfast. We have to return to the front tomorrow. Saya and the girls blushed, while Kota and Yuki giggled. He had two. One died, and the other he screwed? Yuki asked. How long between the two? Kyoko smacked the back of Yuki's head, and told her off. Saya sighed. It was a little over a month after Sakura that they started dating. Now shut up and let me finish. April 19, 638 AFS. I shouldn't have doubted myself yesterday. We did it a few more times after eating breakfast. Though I am a little concerned. We didn't use any means of prevention of pregnancy. I want to be a father, that is true, but right now isn't a good time. We will be leaving, heading back to the war at 1500 hours. Our squad will be heading into the middle of a devil's den. Reports claim that Uchiha Sasuke is there. Right in the middle of Nami. We lost that country in the second month, and there were no survivors. Madara is also making moves. I wasn't there when he was brought back. The Jubi destroyed Central HQ. Though the ancient Uchiha couldn't keep it here for long. The sage was a smart man, linking the ancient destroyer to the moon in a way that not even he would be able to fully release it without all 9 paces. I must fight harder now, so that Madara can never get a hold of Kurama. The final pace. I won't have the time to write for a while. May 3rd, 638 AFS. I can't even begin to describe how angry I am. I lost her in Nami no Kuni. She was pregnant too. I have failed once more. Though I did exact revenge. Sasuke now lies as a pile of ash at the bottom of the sea. The entire island nation, reduced to nothing. It was on that day, just 6 days ago, that I lost Yugao and our love, our unborn. My heart is bleeding right now. Though there is an advantage to such a tragedy. My eyes have awakened. The Rinnegan of destruction shines through me. Unlike the other type I have seen, this one is designed for pure elemental and chakra mastery. I can only use a few of Nagato's abilities, and they are more taxing than using my Biju cloak. Though I can use gravity better than he could, and I feel like I have a connection to time, but I will have to look into it later. There is a girl from Kiri who has been trying to cheer me up, and strangely, it is working. Her name is Yuna. Saya closed the book. There had been evidence of tear stains on the page, and a photo of Yugao. Siko was speechless at the resemblance between her and the girl in the photo. Rei was crying a little, hearing that he had lost so much. Shizuka was also crying along with Yuki and Kyoko. Koda looked at his feet, feeling pity for the blonde leader. Saya closed her eyes to keep the tears from falling. Please keep in mind that you are not done with that cursed reminder. Came the voice of Rika as she walked into the room. If you don't want all of the details, I will tell you that the last girl was also his final attempt at a relationship. Though in the end, it hit him harder than ever. Shizuka looked up with teary eyes. What do you mean, Rika-chan? The blonde nurse asked. She suddenly felt like she shouldn't have asked that. Rika gazed at them all. I will tell you, only if you don't want to read anymore. The others glanced at Saya, who nodded. They then turned to the sniper, waiting for her to speak. Rika sighed, and her gaze turned to near anguish. 2 months after that entry, they got together. But in the end, only 3 months passed before she paused as a few tears fell from her as well. She then spoke with a finality. He was forced to plunge a blade through her heart, as she had been possessed by Uchiha Madara. She was also early in a pregnancy. Each one of those 3 took a piece of him to their grave. He will never be the same as he was before that war. The guilt is slowly tearing him apart. The others gasped at the news, and believed the tale. After seeing all Naruto could do, they didn't think of it as a lie. Rika sighed. I know you all want to help him, I do too, but I know that only love can save him from himself. He is pushing on right now, as a sense of duty. But he cannot go on like this forever. It will kill him. Rei brought her hand to her lips, remembering when she kissed him. She knew that he had feelings for her, Siko, and Saya, but also could tell that he was afraid. Afraid that if they got too close, he would lose them. She sobbed, and it started a chain reaction in the group. Saya didn't even care anymore if they saw her cry, she just took her glasses off, and cried with them. And Yuki looked down in slight shame. Naruto sighed. He could hear all of them cry about his past. I promised them that they would learn of me. It seems that I still cannot stand breaking a promise. I love them, I can't help it. If I try to distance myself now, they will die. But if I let them in, I'll be worse if they do. At least the enemies are not powerful enough to be a concern. Maybe, just maybe, I could let them into my heart. He loved his senses, being able to see, hear, and smell almost as good as a few of the animals in the world, plus his chakra and life sense. But at times he also hated it. He knew that he should leave them alone, but he still couldn't stand to see women cry. It was an affront in his eyes. They should never have to cry in sorrow. Chapter 3, The Road to Dead Manor. 1. Last time. Naruto sighed. He could hear all of them cry about his past. I promised them that they would learn of me. It seems that I still cannot stand breaking a promise. I love them, I can't help it. If I try to distance myself now, they will die. But if I let them in, I'll be worse if they do. At least the enemies are not powerful enough to be a concern. Maybe, just maybe, I could let them into my heart. He loved his senses, being able to see, hear, and smell almost as good as a few of the animals in the world, plus his chakra and life sense. But at times he also hated it. He knew that he should leave them alone, but he still couldn't stand to see women cry. It was an affront in his eyes. They should never have to cry in sorrow. No. Naruto sat at his desk, still pondering what he should do with the girls. The lights were off. He slowly turned his gaze to 3 photos he had in his hand. They were of 3 women. All 3 had smiles, and 2 had hands on their stomachs. He was in all 3 as well, grinning like the happiest man in the world. He smiled nostalgically, and a few tears escaped his eyes. His goggles were sitting on the desk for the moment. His Rinnegan could see through the dark, as though tea were day. Can I really let them all in? He sighed, silently asking the pictures what he should do. So absorbed was he that he didn't hear the small knock on his door, and didn't notice that Rika had entered. He didn't hear her gasp at the sight of his eyes when the lights came on, didn't even notice that they were turned on anyways. Those eyes, they're so beautiful. She approached his desk, and noticed the photos he held. They didn't deserve it, she heard him mumble. What would you 3 say, if you saw me like this now? He then looked up, right at Rika. She gasped at the near pleading she saw in his eyes, though the look wasn't meant to be seen. Is there a reason for such sorrow, Rika-chan? Is there a reason for war? Why does mankind always fight each other when there is no reason to? He looked back at the pictures. Rika knew that she had tears flowing again. His countenance was so broken, she could feel it, even before entering the room. She walked around the desk, and hugged him before she could even think about it. He finally broke down, and cried as she held him. He rarely did so, and she knew that of their entire 4-man team, he would only do so with her. As night finally fell over the city, Hanzo decided to stop reckoning just a few blocks away from the edge of the river. He had a feeling that moving in darkness would be hell. He wondered how his betrothed was doing. Kira-chan, he knew that Jack was right behind him, and would say something. Shut up, Gunner. I don't want to hear it. Jack laughed as he got up and left the bridge. Hanzo sighed, wondering what was wrong with the man. I don't really want to know. He opened a window and spat his chew out. Then sighed again as he saw numerous of the undead still walking around, and turned his thoughts back to his betrothed. Hatsumi Kira, my beloved, where are you right now? With the Emperor, or are you dead? Ray looked downcast. Her and the others continued to talk about Naruto's past. To learn of the pain he held, and to hear that he had other lovers before, made her heart weep for the young man. They decided to skip through the other entries about Yuna, and read about the rest of his time in the war. So many missions, so many Zetsu slain. So many people that were controlled by man, thus leaving so many battlefields stained with blood. Rika had left earlier, though they didn't say anything. They knew that she too had feelings for Naruto. They weren't angry that he had lovers before, or that he would have been a father. They felt for him, and they couldn't really explain why. Ray couldn't, at least. She looked over to Yuki, the rumored school slut. She knew that such rumors were false, having known the girl for nearly 4 years. Yuki may be open about her sexuality, but she knew that the girl was still a virgin. Yuki was just a flirt, who wanted to be popular. Ray then cast her attention to Siko, who was looking at 3 photos that she had grabbed after they fell from the back of the journal. Her eyes were wide, and her mouth was hanging open in near shock. What's wrong, Siko-chan? Ray asked. The others looked at said girl, and noticed her state. These women, the others then gathered to look over her shoulder. Even Saya gasped. The photos were of 3 ladies. One had bright pink hair, and emerald green eyes with Naruto holding her from behind. Both were smiling at the camera. The next was of a long purple-haired woman, older than Naruto. Both were holding swords and wearing a uniform that gave off the feeling of Black Ops members. The smiles weren't as large, but still had joy in them. The last was of a light orange-haired girl, roughly a year older than Naruto. She had a good figure, around mid-C-cup breasts, with a wider hip than the other 2. Her eyes were a chocolate brown. She stood smiling at the camera with Naruto holding her hands around her belly, which was slightly bulged. Naruto's eyes were closed, and he looked to be content. They could tell the girl was pregnant. Each photo had the names of said ladies on them. Haruno Sakura, Yuzuki Yugao, and Katsura Yuna. Siko read. Ray and Saya were surprised at how these women resembled them in a few ways. They also noticed how Naruto had deep blue eyes in the first 2 pictures. I knew it, Yuki said. Blue is not very common in Japan. The others nodded, but stopped when they heard Rika's voice. His eyes are no longer blue. They turned to the sniper, wondering why she was saying that. Shortly after Yugao died, he awoke what he calls the Rinnegan of destruction. His eyes are now a silvery purple that shift to red if he is in a negative state of emotions. They each possess a 6-pointed star for the pupils, and have 6 black rings around them. The sclera have disappeared as the iris now covers the entire eye. They blinked, wondering how eyes could change like that. Shizuka decided to ask. How could eyes change so drastically, Rika-chan? Rika sighed and walked over to them with another book. The way both he and this book explains it is that he has what is called a Dijitsu Kekkei Genkai, or ocular technique bloodline limit. She paused to see if they were following. His eyes are the physical representation of his blood, which carries a special code in it that allows him to use enhanced sight, along with other powers that can only be used by him, or those connected to his lineage. Siko nodded. It's like a family trait, passed down through genetics. Much like how certain traits are passed from parent to child. But this begs the question, who did he get it from? Rika smiled at her, as well as Saya, since the rose-haired girl got it at the same time. A good question. In his world, there were 3 clans. All distantly related. The Uchiha, the Senju, and the Uzumaki. All 3 were descended from a man called the Rakuta Sennin. She opened the other book, turning to a picture of a dark figure. The colored part would be the man's eyes. The girls gasped. The eyes were beautiful, yet imposing. Almost as though a god were staring into their souls. They were called the eyes of Kami. And normally you had to mix Uchiha and Senju DNA to get them. The Uzumaki were cousins of the Senju, but somehow Naruto had Uchiha blood in him as well. Though he says that his cousin Nagato activated it, they didn't fully activate. She turned to the group and said these last words for the night. The 3 clans are mired in a history of tragedy, love, and hatred. My guess is that Naruto's father, or mother, had Uchiha blood, though it wasn't potent enough to give him the Sharingan. The other parent was an Uzumaki, who were related to the Senju clan. The combination of blood and the tragedy of losing a lover who was carrying his child gave birth to his full Rinnegan. She sighed as she finished. I don't know what kind of power the eyes would give him, as records are sparse, and most are legends. The others were surprised yet slightly skeptical. Shizuka wanted to study the medical aspects of such things, while also wanting to comfort him. Saya wanted to know everything, while Rei was concerned. Sika wanted to see this power for herself, and Yuki along with Kyoko allowed a little lust to show at the beauty of such eyes. They all then talked more of his past. Rika spoke of his time as a Hayabusa member, and of some of the missions he has had from the Emperor. The river was just ahead of the reckoning. Hanzo was feeling a little nervous though. He felt like the air was getting colder, as though a predator was approaching. He then spotted a man in his side mirror. Uzumaki! The man yelled, as though he were angry. Hanzo then started reckoning up again, as Naruto appeared on the turret balcony. Jack had already got the turret ready for firing. Wait, gunner. I'll deal with this, Naruto said, just as the other members of the group appeared. He then jumped off of the reckoning, landing right on top of a zombie's head, crushing the undead skull. The man was wearing a hooded trench coat and a nanosuit beneath it. Naruto recognized the type of weapon he held. This could get interesting. I feel that energy from earlier rolling off of him almost like chakra. But something is wrong. The man stared at him with hate. And Naruto then knew that this opponent wasn't like the other humans of this world. The man shouted at him. I will have my revenge. You who have stolen my place in the honorable Hayabusa will now die. The man lunged forward, firing rounds from his gun blade at the blonde shinobi. The battle had begun, and the girls were worried, as Reckoning pulled into the river. Its aquatic drive mechanism activating, and causing a wave to rush forth from the impact. Naruto found it easy to dodge the bullets from a distance. The man was a good shot, but Naruto was faster. Naruto sighed, now recognizing the man as his hood fell. Kishikara Kagero, reported to have been kidnapped shortly before my arrival in this world, was a captain of the Hayabusa, with recommendations from even the President of the United States. Weapon skills were reported to have been amazing before I joined. Wielding a custom weapon called a gunblade. Disappeared during the middle of a recon against local Yakuza bosses. Naruto recounted as he dodged bullets, heading for the river. Kagero was a good athlete, being able to run faster than most people. Naruto sighed as he pulled his katana from its scabbard, and cleanly cut 2 bullets into fourths. He'd already had enough, and leapt onto the surface of the water. Around 30 meters out. The man followed him, running atop the surface. What? Naruto mentally shouted. He could sense the strange energy being used. And finally recognized it. Nanotech, damn it. That would mean that the Dr. Asterisk was the one to take him fuck. He then charged forward to engage Kagero. Beginning a dance that was a sight to see, even though it was deadly. Naruto stepped left, dodging a thrust and gunshot. Kagero spun, bringing his blade to decapitate. Naruto ducked. Kishikara Kagero, you have been reported MIA. The Emperor will be pleased to see you again, Naruto said, dodging 3 more strikes. Shut up. You stole my position, I will kill you. Naruto kept dodging strikes that were faster than the average humans. Naruto smirked, his eyes critically watching the missing Hayabusa member. This is a better challenge. He pulled his katana out, and blocked an overhead cleaving strike. You pack a decent punch, Kagero-san. Allow me to test your full capabilities, would you? He then threw the enraged man away, by finishing his own swing. Kagero was thrown around 10 meters, but righted himself, landing on his feet. He suddenly felt a dark pressure, as though a monster stood before him. He started to sweat just a little. What is this feeling? He's not human, he thought, just before Naruto shot towards him. He was quick enough to dodge being bisected, but was then kicked further out towards the middle of the river. Grunting as he flew, he looked up, only to notice the blonde right above him. Naruto swung his blade down, while Kagero blocked. Kagero grimaced as he saw a good-sized chip taken from the blade of his weapon. He then brought it around, and fired the gun mechanism, putting a hole into Naruto's left shoulder. The girls saw this on the reckoning, and cried out. Though Naruto didn't even seem to be affected, as he kept pressing his attack. Kagero was finding it difficult to keep up. Naruto raked his blade across the man's sword arm, leaving a wound deep enough to slow him down. Naruto then used a burst of speed, appearing behind the Rouge, and spun in a roundhouse kick. The blow connected with Kagero's back, and he then found himself breaking through a few walls, and ending up inside of a bank filled with the undead. Naruto gazed at the direction he had thrown Kagero, and sighed, before heading towards the reckoning. The mobile barracks was just about to pass the middle of the river. He jumped up, landing on top of the truck's box. He noticed everyone standing there, and looking worried at him. The bullet in his shoulder was still an open wound, and blood was flowing from it. His coat's left sleeve was stained, and his arm drenched. He sighed as he saw Shizuka jump over the turret balcony's rail, rushing towards him to help. Followed by the others, except for Jack and Rika. Naruto-kun! The ditzy nurse shouted as she reached him. Instantly reaching for his arm, she didn't expect him to stop her with the injured arm. Do not concern yourself with this wound, Shizuka. I have suffered through worse. He then took his coat off, showing the gray vest beneath, and his red muscle shirt. He put his right hand on the wound, and proceeded to open it further, reaching in with 2 fingers to pull the .44 round out. The others grimaced as he flung the round into the river, but were shocked as the wound began to steam, and close before their very eyes. This is why I have never been out for long. This is why I don't get sick, and why I have only ever been in a hospital for a week at the longest. He gazed at them all, as the wound fully closed. Barely a small light spot to show that new skin was there. I regenerate from every wound. The only thing that I have yet to see myself survive is decapitation. Which is something I don't even want to try. He then picked his coat up, and walked towards the entrance to the Reckoning's turret balcony. Jack. Tell Hanzo to power down at Rika's apartment. We will not be moving again until the sun is up. The gunner nodded, and followed his commander. Jack went down towards the bridge to give the driver his orders, while the girls and Kota followed quietly. The Reckoning turning to bear its new course. Regeneration. How the fuck is that possible? Was he experimented on or something? Saya nearly screamed out, getting even more frustrated about the puzzle that was Naruto. He is like a fucking super soldier. Shizuka put her finger to her chin, slightly agreeing with the rosette-haired girl. Did his journal say anything about this, Saya-chan? She asked. The smartest girl of Fujimi shook her head. No, it's almost as if he has had it from birth, or got it after the war. Siko left them all to debate that, preferring to get the truth from the source. Though she really didn't care how he could regenerate. She only wanted to talk to her best friend, the man she was falling for harder every day. Even more so now that the end of the world was happening. She brought a hand to her chest, and pressed it there with her eyes glazing over. Remembering the days she and the other two, Rei and Saya, would hang out and talk with him. He always, ever since they all met, had that cold and militaristic posture. But he opened up a little to them. Siko sighed, though not in frustration or sorrow. She stepped up to his office's door, and knocked. Naruto knew who was trying to see him. Enter. He called, and the door opened. He was typing a small report to send when they made it to Takagi Manor. His eyes were uncovered and slightly glowing in the dim light of the office. She finally noticed how Spartan and cold it seemed in the room. Bland and gray. Please have a seat, Siko-chan. I'll be with you in just a moment. She nodded, closing the door and proceeding to a chair before the desk. She gazed at his silvery purple eyes, and thought the same as Rika did. I could gaze into them forever, so lost was she in those eyes that she almost failed to notice him speak. Even if my eyes seem beautiful, please remember that they possess a destructive streak. He then turned from his laptop, powering it down. She suddenly felt like jumping over the desk and kissing him. Though she stopped herself for now. Naruto-kun, will you ever love again? She whispered, not expecting him to hear. He sighed, and looked towards the 3 pictures he had in frames. The only decorations in the office. I already do, Siko-chan. You 3 have torn a hole into the ice around my heart. I am happy, and afraid. He turned his gaze back to her. If anything should happen to you, or Rei, or Saya, I don't think I would be able to continue anymore. Siko's gaze went soft, and she stood, heading around the desk. She stopped before him, keeping her eyes locked to his. She then reached down and hugged him, her cheek nestling against his pulse, and kissing it. I'll be here for you, Naruto-kun. I promise, even if the others begin to hate you. Even if they cannot take the fact that you are nearly immortal. I will always be here for you. He gasped, as she kissed his pulse with every sentence. And his eyes widened. How did you know? He didn't push her away, or stop her from chastely kissing his neck. She brought her face level with his. Regeneration stops the aging of cells. Not only does it close wounds, it can literally make you live forever. Am I right? He gasped as she lightly held his face, bringing it closer to hers. She then placed her lips on his. The kiss was chaste, but filled with an emotion he only hoped to receive from someone again. Giving in, he wrapped his arms around her waist. Their eyes closed, and he finally let himself open fully to her. Anything she did there, he would accept. His eyes pulsed behind his lids, and he broke away to kiss her jaw, followed by her neck. His fangs grew slightly and he pierced her flesh, letting his chakra through them. She gasped and moaned, as a mark formed right where he had bit her. It was of a fox's head. Light lime warning. She suddenly felt herself heat up. She brought her arms up and stroked his hair. He had taken his fangs out, and they shrunk, but he continued to kiss her neck lightly. He held her close, yet gently. She then grinded her hips against his. Her D-cup bust lightly pressing against his chest. His right hand coming back and lightly groping her left tit. She moaned again, and he picked her up, placing her on his desk. He then kissed just between her breasts, her school top slipping a little. Her brow riding up a little as she thrust her chest up. Loving how he kissed near her heart. His left hand slowly went up her long skirt, following her leg. He then reached her covered slit, and rubbed it. She gasped, and her eyes flew open, glazing over. She began to thrust her hips slowly. He then kissed her, as he moved her thigh aside, and slowly inserted a finger. She gasped again, and moaned when he started to thrust his finger inside of her. He continued to do so, while pulling her school top up and bringing his mouth to kiss her now uncovered left breast, having pulled her brow up as well. He lightly licked her nipple, and then began to suck on it. After 10 minutes of this, she suddenly felt a knot of energy forming in her stomach, before going rigid and trembling. She gasped out and felt her core moisten before exploding in pleasure. She moaned loudly, and brought his face up to kiss him. Just before another knock sounded at the door. Light lime meant. What? Naruto called out as Siko readjusted her top to cover her breasts. Rika's voice came from the door. Sir. We are nearing my apartment. The place is surrounded by them. Naruto sighed. Arigato Rika-chan. He then turned back to a blushing Siko, and whispered to her. Gomen, Siko-chan. She nodded, and finished fixing her clothes. Noticing the slight bulge in his pants, she blushed a little harder. Big damn, I'll need a shower at some point, she thought. Naruto sat back down, wondering what had happened to his self-control, as she left. He then placed his left hand over his heart, before going rigid. Shit! I marked her! He then stood and left. Naruto appeared on the turret balcony once again. I'm going to call it THNS from now on. Gazing out at Rika's apartment through his goggles, he sighed before jumping off, to take care of the creatures on the ground. While Rika and Kota shot the ones on the balcony. Remember to use the suppressors, Naruto had ordered. It had only taken a few minutes, as Naruto didn't want to waste energy or ammo. When the small op was finished, he told Rika to use a ladder, having Hanzo pull closer to the wall. Jack and Hanzo decided to stay on the reckoning, in case they needed to make a quick exit. After everyone else had gotten into the courtyard, Rika pulled her keys out heading for the door. Reckoning going fully quiet. Shizuka skipped up with Rika, happy to be in a familiar place. None of the others noticed that Siko was still blushing slightly. She decided to hit the shower first. I have some better clothing here, you'll need it more than those, Rika said to the girls. Naruto-kun, your other outfit should be in your room. Naruto nodded, remembering the times he would have to stay there for planning missions with the team. He smirked as he thought about his gear. Right. We'll hopefully get a decent rest here, he said as they all entered. He waited till everyone else entered, before going in himself. Though before closing the door, he glanced back down the road they came from. Feeling two sources of life moving in the darkness, and one was small. This doesn't bode well. Naruto entered his room that Rika always left for him. The apartment was bigger than what she had working in the police force. He sighed, still thinking about what he did with Siko. I lost control, but I feel like it was supposed to happen. He opened the closet, and pulled his outfit from the rack. Taking his clothes off, he pulled on a black undershirt, and black cargo pants. Pulling on his socks, he He then picked up a newer long coat. It was crimson, and closed in front from the waist up. The right side of the front went to the left shoulder and connected to a pauldron on the left. Sliding into it, he pulled his head through, and his arms went into the sleeves. The coat flowed behind him to near his ankles. He then placed a strap from the pauldron circling around the right side of his waist, and a belt put on over the coat. He then put on some gauntlet gloves, and put his guns into their holsters, nestled on the back of the belt. Strapping his katana to the left side of his waist, and placing a few of his kunai into special holsters on the shoulder strap. He flicked his left wrist, watching as a special blade slid out from his gauntlet. He smirked. The warlock walks again. And my new profile pic is his outfit, just without the scout rifle. And in different colors. It is a render of the warlock class from the game Destiny. I play it, and I do have a warlock above level 20. He placed his goggles back over his Rinnegan, and pulled on a pair of black boots. The armor of the outfit was polished black as well. He turned and saw Rika. You've only wore that once before. Project 1, if I remember you had a different team then. He nodded to her words. Many died that day, we called it the Hive. Problem was, they didn't stay dead until you either put a bullet in their brain or cut off the head, or cleaved them in two from the skull down. He sighed, and stared outside. It was hell, and they were faster than these things. The place was nearly pitch black too. Without light, all you could see was your hands before you. Rika looked down to her feet, knowing it was a sore subject. She had only read what wasn't classified Tier 1. Most of the op was blacked out, only Naruto survived. Of the 20 teams sent, he was the lone survivor. Not Resident Evil Hive. Siko went into the bathing room of the apartment, and set out to clean herself. After finally stripping and running water into the bath, Saya, along with the other girls, entered. Shizuka started to strip, until she noticed a certain smell next to her. She looked at Siko and blushed. Siko-chan, did you? The others looked at the swordswoman and saw her cheeks heat up. Siko blushed at the attention they were giving her, and decided to tell them what happened. Yuki grinned after she was done telling the story, while everyone else blushed. They had already started bathing. Saya was sitting next to her, blushing as she tried to see if she had grabbed the shampoo. Yes, that part happens, starting a near water war. After it all was done, Saya decided to ask the girl. He admitted that his regeneration makes him practically immortal? Siko nodded to the Rosette's question. The others then noticed the mark on the left side of her neck. I didn't know you had a tattoo, Siko-chan. Ray said. Siko looked at her in confusion, and watched as the others looked at her neck. She walked over to a mirror and saw it. A white fox, with black wings stared out from the spot Naruto had bit her. I didn't have this before, she then gasped. This is where he bit me. The others stared at the mark, wondering what it was for. Saya thought for a moment. It was said that demons would mark their mates by biting them, leaving a sort of message that the marked was claimed. Could this be like that? She gazed at Siko. Siko-san, we should talk about whether or not we all love him, spoke Yuki. Thus started a conversation that lasted a little longer than the last. They would decide to officially be a harem for their savior. The man they were all falling for. Naruto opened the security locker, hidden beneath the bed in his room. I'll need these. He grabbed a customized .50 cal LKCR asterisk and a martial AR star. He also grabbed a .44 mag Colt Anaconda star. He grinned as soon as he felt its weight, and cursed the weapon. Sealing the two rifles into his left gauntlet, he put the Anaconda in a holster that he strapped to his right thigh. Well, girls, it's been a while, but we can finally dance again, he whispered to the guns. He remembered when he made all of them. Flashback 43 days after arrival. Naruto sat before a workbench, multiple firearm parts scattered around. He just finished putting the final paste into Kushina, the second 50 calories handgun he had made. Emblazoned in gold lettering on the black barrel was the name of his mother, just below in a smaller font was the will of fire. On both sides of the handle was a picture of a red-haired woman with purple eyes. He smiled, looking at her smiling face. I miss you, Kasan, and Tusan too. He sighed and looked to the other two projects he was making. A high-velocity sniper rifle, and an auto rifle. The sniper was polished black, with a darkened thermal scope. Part of it was complete. The other was silver, and in gold lettering was the specifics. Martial .9 mm, .22 LR. Meaning he could use two types of ammunition with it. It didn't take him long to figure out how to use a gun. They were far more powerful than a standard kunai, unless if he threw one with his full strength. But kunai could be easy to trace. Bullets were far more common. Though he preferred to get up close and slice his opponents, if he couldn't sneak behind and decapitate, that is. He chuckled as he thought of that. I can at least clean a sword better than putting in the effort to pick up kunai. He sighed, and picked up the last he would need for his .50 cal LKCR. Adding in the final paces for the firing mech, and the locking mech. For the 8-round clip. Illegal, but effective, he thought, putting the final screw in. He then set to engrave in gold the technical info onto the barrel. 50 caliber LKSR. Below it he engraved for that special touch. Bring forth death from far away. He then added a suppressor to the barrel. He laughed at the joke, though it wasn't like his old mirthful laugh. I won't use these much, but I do need to at least use them when required. This apocalypse Kami-sama told me about. She still didn't give specifics, only that there was no more room in hell. Doesn't this universe use the reincarnation wheel? I thought that souls took too much time and energy to create. He sighed again. I'll think about it later. He then put his guns and special seals. His official Hayabusa outfit ready for any mission the Emperor would give him. FB end. He then checked his sword, and made sure he had his 6 other blades sealed. He stood up and made his way out to the balcony. The balcony ran all around the 2nd floor, connecting to each room. He sighed as his eyes picked up on 2 living people, trying to move quietly. One was a man, the other a little girl. He decided to watch, and see if they could find a safe place. Though he knew that by the end of this night, he would have at least one more in the group. Siko watched as the others argued in the bathing room. I think we should go with Yuki-san's idea. He shouldn't have to choose between us. Damn it, Rei-chan, Saya-chan, stop being selfish. Though she didn't say that out loud. After watching them fight for another 5 minutes, she finally had enough. Will you all just shut up? She screamed, shocking everyone else. Silence met her yell. Good. Now I strongly think that we should follow Yuki-san's idea. The world has practically ended, so there is no reason for him to only have one lover. Look at how many have died, only to come back with this hunger. We have to ensure not only our survival, but that of the human race too. The others stared at her a little wide-eyed, before Saya gave in. Siko-chan's right. We do have to worry about more than just ourselves. The rosette-haired girl then turned to Rei. Just think about it, Rei-chan. With so few humans left, we can't afford to fight like this. Rei glared at the others, before finally sighing. I guess you're right. Yuki stared at them, confused at the fact that Siko could influence them. She had been trying to get the last 3 girls to join for more than 10 minutes. What the fuck? She then grinned. Alright. Now let's all run in there naked, and ride his Adonis ass till the wee hours of tomorrow morning. First I'm gonna drop down and dash. The others just tuned her out, though they were blushing quite a bit. Naruto clenched his fist seeing the father get killed by a very scared man. He then turned to Rika as she had joined him once more. I'm going after that little girl. Wait here. He spoke with such an icy tone that she froze. He then disappeared, moving at a speed she had only read about in reports. Leaving without any notion that he was ever there before. And the other commanders said he was even faster than this. Holy shit. Chapter 4, A Silent Night, Dead Morning. Last time. Naruto clenched his fist seeing the father get killed by a very scared man. He then turned to Rika as she had joined him once more. I'm going after that little girl. Wait here. He spoke with such an icy tone that she froze. He then disappeared, moving at a speed she had only read about in reports. Leaving without any notion that he was ever there before. And the other commanders said he was even faster than this. Holy shit. Now. Alice, run and hide. Don't let them find you. The father of Alice smiled, and breathed his last. The girl's breath hitched. Papa, she tried to shake him. When he didn't respond, she let loose her tears. Papa! She cried out, alerting the undead to her location. As the things approached her, she shut her eyes. Suddenly she heard a strange sound. The sound was of metal cleaving through flesh. Her eyes shot open as she heard the thud of a body. Looking up, she saw a blonde-haired man flashing around the yard at speeds she couldn't comprehend. He would appear and a flash of light would pierce, or cleave through, one of the monsters. Then he would disappear again, only to reappear next to another. Her eyes widened as he appeared before her, his back facing her, and she then heard what sounded like a fountain spraying water for a quick moment. She saw a few red drops land just in front of his feet. The process only took around 3 seconds, too fast for her young mind, or the mind of any normal human to catch. He wore a crimson long coat, and in his hand she recognized a katana. In the belt on the small of his back were 2 guns. A black, and a silver, contrasting each other. He then turned to her, and his orange goggles seemed to pierce into her soul. Though his stance relaxed, as he knelt down to her. His hand gently grasped her shoulder, and he asked in a caring voice. Are you okay, little one? She lunged at him, grabbing onto his chest and sobbing as she heard his soft and gentle tone. He wrapped his right arm around her, having sheathed his blade earlier. He whispered soothing words into her ear. Her cries would have attracted more of the undead, if it weren't for the cover fire given from afar. He allowed her to let go and turned to her father. He then pulled out what looked like a scroll, and started writing strange symbols on it. He then said to her, We will give him a proper resting place later. We need to get out of here. His voice was colder than she preferred, but she nodded. She then picked up the puppy she had found with her father, and watched as her father disappeared in a poof of smoke. Her eyes widened again, but was unable to say anything as the blonde-haired man picked her up. "Hold on," he said before she could feel wind passing around her. Her eyes closed, due to the wind hitting them. She still felt him holding her to his chest, and sighed as she felt safer than any other time before. She then felt the wind stop, and heard a woman's voice. "Boss, did you really have to rush off like that?" She felt the rumble in his chest as he chuckled. "Rika-chan, you should know that I'll always be faster than you can fire that rifle." Alice opened her eyes, looking around to see that they were on a balcony. She then saw the woman, who was holding a rifle that she saw in her dad's old gun cabinet. Though this was newer, and looked in better condition. "True, though I thought you would have moved a little faster than that," the woman replied. Alice then looked away from the balcony, still held by the man. Her eyes widened as she saw the house they were at before, more than a block away. Kagero grunted as he finished the last of them in the bank. He then kicked one of the heads away, and snarled, "Damn it! That bitch assured me that I could kill him." He then grabbed his phone as it started to ring. "What?" he snarled after realizing it was from the doctor. "You're telling me to get back to base? I could put a bullet in his brain right now." He sighed a few minutes later. "Fine. I'll be there shortly," he said just before putting another round in a zombie just outside of the bank. "Stupid bitch," he mumbled, then walked away. Alice sat in the second-floor sitting room, not leaving Naruto's side for longer than a few moments to use the restroom. She still hadn't gotten the name of her savior, but then again, she was still shook up about her father's death. Rika had offered her some juice, which she slowly drank. She watched as Rika and Naruto looked over a map of the city. "We'll have to leave as soon as daybreak. We can't delay any longer," Naruto spoke in his cold tone. His eyes gazed at the map through his goggles. Certain areas were marked, and the bridges were crossed out after seeing the news footage. Alice cast her gaze to the map as well. She then mustered up her courage, and asked in a soft voice. "Sumamason." The two looked at her, though she flinched at the gaze of Naruto's goggles. He sighed lightly, before taking them off. She gasped as soon as he opened his eyes. They were a beautiful silvery purple. Almost pure silver. "What is it, little one?" he asked softly, though his tone was still a bit colder than what her father would speak to others with. Watashiwa Alice. "May I ask your names?" She relaxed as the two chuckled lightly. "Of course, I had forgotten that I never introduced myself. Watashiwa Naruto," he said as he put his hand forward. She grasped it lightly and bowed her head. "This lovely sniper here is Rika. You will soon meet the others, and our other two team members you will see in the morning." She said thank you, but then pointed to a small road on the map. "Papa would take me down this road every day after school. It has a small park, and leads to an old train station," Alice said, sounding far more mature than her age would suggest, and still subdued. Naruto nodded, knowing about the old place. It was scheduled to be torn down in a few weeks. But the current world problems would make that impossible now. "That could help us get across the river, but I don't know if the reckoning can fit the old crossway," he said, and nodded to Alice with the smallest upturning of his lips. "What about the ATV or your bike?" Rika asked. The sniper flinched as he turned his gaze to her. "Are you implying that I should leave my truck here, sniper?" Rika backed away at his tone, feeling like she had just poked a sleeping dragon with a stick. "And no, sir." She relaxed as he turned his gaze back to the map. "Good. You should know by now that my truck costed more to make than your yearly income in a decade." She sighed in relief as he seemed to let up on the ice in his tone. Note to self, don't try to get him to leave the damn mobile barracks behind. Did he just call it a truck? It's not a fucking truck. They then heard the other ladies leaving the bathing room, whilst giggling could be heard from a few of them. Ray blushed as she entered her temporary room. She let the towel around her fall. Opening the closet, she found it full of sweat outfits and other clothing. Her E-cup breasts swayed slightly as she looked through the closet, and choosing a dark gray-colored outfit. Like most of them, it reminded her of an American SWAT officer. She sighed as she remembered what the other girls had said in the bathroom. Can I really share him with others? I'll admit that I don't have a problem with them, but am I willing to let them have the man I care for? She sighed as she reached into the drawers and pulled out some yellow undergarments. Almost like his hair, she idly noted, and noticed that they were the correct size. She dressed herself slowly, though checked herself out in the room's mirror. She grasped her breasts, and ran her right hand across her stomach. She then ran her right hand down and slid it across her shaven core. Contemplating masturbation, she sighed. She knew that she hadn't ever had sex before, but she was seriously thinking of hunting Naruto down and claiming him first. She sighed, and sat down, pulling her bare legs to her chest with arms wrapped around her knees. Laying her chin atop her arms, she stared into her reflection. She knew that she was beautiful, but she couldn't see why anyone would love her. Not with her problems. She stopped that thought, remembering that Naruto had also lost people close to him. He's lost even more than that, though, all of his friends and family. She sighed again, though admired how he could push on through such things. She knew that he was practically destroying himself by not properly grieving. She then felt a well of determination pass through her, and her eyes locked onto the orbs in her reflection. I cannot allow him to do that. I will help him, and I will share him if that's what it takes. She stood and finished dressing. She was now willing to do anything for the blonde. She would finally show him her love, and now accepted that the rules of the world were different. Under such circumstances as this, I'm not surprised that executions are going to be a norm, Naruto thought, as he continued looking towards the bridge. A few protesters were already shot, and the undead were being drawn towards the noise. We shouldn't have too many problems crossing the river fully now. He turned to see Rei come out to the balcony from 3 doors away. He gazed at her, sensing the fire that had ignited in her heart. Maybe it'll be better. At least she is determined now. He sighed as his gaze fell back towards the bridge as he heard more gunshots in the distance. We'll be leaving near dawn. Be prepared, and get some rest. He called out to her. He turned back to enter, before pausing. We also have a new person in the group, a young girl. He then entered the apartment again. Rei stared at his retreating form, before noticing the form of a little girl in his room. She appeared to be sleeping, and was under the covers of his bed. Rei suddenly felt her heart warm a little, as she saw him check on the girl. He then stepped over to the small desk in the room, and pulled out a scroll. He started to grab a few items and place them next to it, before sealing them away. She felt entranced watching him write the runes. It was fluid, the strokes seeming to be in a dance of their own. The speed of it was faster than her father would write when practicing such calligraphy. He always seems to make his work appear a dance. Everything he does is like watching a dance. She sighed as he finally finished. She caught his glance for a moment, before deciding to get some rest. She turned back to head to her room, and blushed as she thought of his skills. All the others would agree, he could turn a fight into a dance like a master. Naruto felt drawn to Alice for some reason. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was because of the apocalypse. Maybe it was because she had just lost her father. Or maybe, feeling a warmth in his chest, it was because he wanted to be a father himself. More than anything, he felt like she was now his responsibility. He felt like he had to take her in, and raise her. By her appearance, she seemed to be 7 or 8 years old. He was struck with nostalgia for a moment. Remembering Sakura, Yugao, and Yuna. He wondered if Alice would have been like one of his own children. His eyes glazed over as he saw an apparition of each of his loves. He saw Sakura, reading to Alice. He then saw Yugao tucking in the girl, before turning to him. He then saw the most heart-wrenching. He saw Yuna laying next to the girl, and was humming while embracing the child. He felt a familiar, yet still unwelcome sting in his eyes. He pulled his goggles off, and wiped a few tears away. His hands clenched as he felt a sob trying to break free. He turned back towards the balcony, and saw the crescent moon. It seemed to be waning. Like the moon itself had lost its smile. He stepped out, closing the sliding glass door behind him, and finally allowed the tears to shed. It was silent. He strangled the sob to stay in. He couldn't sense much at the moment, though he could hear the damnable groans. He also heard the light footsteps of Siko as she approached. She gently embraced him after seeing his tears, and his eyes once more. They seemed to be a mix of silver, purple, and red. A storm was sweeping across those eyes. She could feel the war waging in his heart and mind. She then gently grabbed his face, and stared into his eyes. "Don't worry, Naruto-kun. I am here," she said in a whisper. She then brought his face closer to hers, and kissed him chastely. Kota fiddled with the parts of his guns. One thing he always made sure to do, was checking to see if they were in working condition. Are they all like this? He wondered. Knowing that the ones he had checked were of the best quality one could find. He finished checking the .45, and grinned. "Naruto, my friend, you have some really good firearms." He turned as he heard said man chuckle, and widened his eyes at Naruto's new look. "You will find that all of my weapons are top-grade, Kota. I even have a few assassins pining to buy from me. All of them first class." Kota gasped as he recognized the new garb. "You're the warlock?" The blonde nodded to the bespectacled marksman. Kota had read about the fabled warlock on the internet once. A demon to many of the American soldiers who were stationed in Japan. But considered a warlord, or a god to others. He remembered first hearing of the military's strangest new player. Said to have been the most powerful commander to have appeared in history. The skills of the warlock were vague at best. A complete enigma. Hailed by many of the UN leaders as the best. Many rumors were floating around about the myth of a man so good an assassin and soldier, that he could walk through a wall of gunfire, and not be scratched. No one had ever gotten a clear look at the warlock, besides the world leaders. Kota could see Naruto being the mythical figure, his aura would be enough to say so. The blonde chuckled again, and turned to the balcony he had entered from. We'll be leaving just after dawn. I'm also letting you know that we have another survivor. Her name is Alice, and she is quite young. I couldn't leave her out there. The blonde then disappeared in a poof of smoke, startling the gun otaku. This would also happen to the others, except for Saya. Saya watched as Naruto walked into her room. His goggles were over his eyes, and he looked like he was a little sad. Her eyes softened as she gazed at him, watching him take his damned goggles off before speaking. She gasped at the sight of his eyes. They were hauntingly beautiful, and she was drawn even more to their gaze. Saya-chan, I apologize for not spending time with you, or the others. I wanted to let you know that we will be leaving after dawn. So you may want to get some rest now. She nodded, though could barely process what he said. She felt like she was entranced by him. His eyes seemed to pierce her soul. She felt like she was staring into the eyes of a god, and found herself more and more willing to give him her body. We also have picked up another survivor here. She was able to shake the haze from her mind. She is a little girl. Her name is Alice, and she is an orphan as of tonight. Saya nodded slowly, but then breathed out a little, catching Naruto's attention. Naruto-kun, there is something I want to talk to you about. He noticed a pause at the end. What is it, Saya-chan? For a minute she did nothing, but then lunged and enveloped him in a hug. Shitaru, she whispered. He lightly gasped, hearing this, and after a few seconds he returned her hug. Hearing her breath hitch, like she was about to cry. After a few minutes he turned to speak. Saya-chan, he was cut off as her lips brushed against his and stayed there for a chaste, yet meaningful kiss. He froze for only a moment, before returning the affectionate gesture. After a few more moments she pulled back. Her eyes were glazed slightly, but still held coherence. Naruto-kun, may I stay with you tonight? His eyes widened, and he would have turned her away, if he knew that she only wanted to have sex. He could see that she didn't, at least not right now. She only seemed to want to be close to him. His heart felt warm, and he nodded. Hi, Saya-chan, you may. I will not turn you away. She then buried her face into his chest, and sighed. Arigato, Naruto-kun. He then held her tighter, as a sense of vertigo washed over her. She opened her eyes to see that they were in a different room. Let me notify the others about tomorrow first, then we may go to bed. He turned, and brought his hands up in a very familiar sign to himself. Suddenly, as she was taking her shirt off, she heard a popping sound. Looking at what made the noise, her eyes widened again. There were 5 other Narutos in front of her. They nodded to their creator, and disappeared. He turned, and saw her state of near toplessness, and her wide eyes. He knew that she liked to sleep in the buff, and sighed. I hope I can control myself since this wasn't his room. He would have to contend with the fact that his sweatpants were not in there. Meaning he would have to sleep in either his boxers, or nude. Saya then reorganized her thoughts to ask him. What the hell? He chuckled nervously, and started to take his outfit off. I am a shinobi, Saya-chan, was all that he said, before noticing her now completely nude state. She was blushing, but not hiding herself. And so he was given a very nice, and arousing view. He then noticed something. So you are a natural rose. He then blushed and turned away. She blushed even more, before stepping up to him, and embracing him from behind. Anagai, don't turn from me. Naruto-koi. He gasped at the suffix, and slowly turned to her. Saya-chan, she then kissed him again. Nothing else was said? He decided to be fair, and sleep nude. Though he made sure that nothing would happen. He allowed her to lay her head on his chest, as they got beneath the covers. Slowly they fell asleep, though Naruto thought one last thing. I love you too, Saya-chan, but can I get away with not having to choose between any of you? Sleep then embraced him. And yeah, no lems yet. Dream sequence, Naruto. I found myself in a place that nearly stilled my heart. A place I never wanted to see again. All around me were corpses, though they moved as if they were still alive. I looked to my left and saw a sign. The sign of the stand where I would eat at as a child. Back then, it was the only place that would let me eat there really. They never overcharged me either. The Ichirakus were standing behind the counter, and seemed to be happy. Though they too were mangled and broken. Half of Tuchi's face was missing, while Ayam seemed to float as she was missing her lower extremities. There were 3 people sitting at the stand. 3 that I recognized. They were the only ones in sight who weren't portrayed as moving corpses. Their skin was unblemished, and showed color that I remember them having at least when they walked amongst the living. Their forms seemed sad, however, and I felt my heart completely stop and nearly explode at the sight of them. Sakura-chan, Yugaheim, and Yunaheim. I then felt that familiar stinging in my eyes, and tried to approach them. My body, however, was feeling weighted. I moved slowly, as though I were mired in tar. It seemed to take an eternity to reach them. My voice was hoarse, as though I hadn't had any water in days. But I still called out to them. They didn't seem to hear me though. I tried many times to get their attention, though it seemed as though I were completely ethereal. Like I was a ghost that couldn't interact with anything. After a while I heard Sakura-chan speak. Do you think that Naruto-kun will truly open his heart again? She asked the other two. They seemed to shrug, though Yunaheim spoke after a moment. If he hasn't changed completely, then hi. I do. Her voice still sounding light and kind, as though it were a song from the heavens. Sakura-chan hummed, the sound nearly breaking me, due to the doubt that seemed to lace it. I really shouldn't have been surprised. Yuna had been the only one who never tried to change me, both subtly or overtly. She accepted me and my pain. It is why I loved her the most. Yuna huffed at the other two. You two may have loved him, but you never should have tried to mold him. She turned to the pink-haired girl. You tried to continuously force him to do things. You had control issues. She then turned to Yugaheim. And you may have tried to get him to be happy and soothed. But the way you did, she then turned away, her eyes going somewhere in the distance. You made it too fast. Yugaheim slumped her shoulders, her head going down to look at her lap. Sakura then turned to the orange-haired woman. What about you? You weren't strong enough to resist that infernal possession. Her voice then went cold. You couldn't even break it to say you were sorry. Yuna flinched at the woman's words. All three of them then seemed to fall into depression. I tried to call out again. To say that I was sorry, and that they shouldn't blame themselves. Or each other. To instead blame me, since I couldn't save them. It was here that the wounds appeared. Sakura-chan had a pierced heart, a long blade appearing through her chest with the tip pointing ahead of her. Yugaheim had a hole in her abdomen. Her womb's area completely gone, with charred skin almost everywhere around it. Yunaheim had cut marks, and a wind-enhanced blade mark piercing her chest, along with a slit throat. I choked, and my tears finally fell. I cried, and my voice screamed out to them, begging them to turn and see me. It was all for naught, as they seemed to slowly disintegrate. When they finally disappeared, I fell to my knees. Cold, and my heart shattered beyond all hope of repair. I then heard a voice. One that I had heard before. Do not worry, Naruto-kun. We are here. I turned to look at the sound, and found 7 women standing there. Siko in an elaborate kimono that matched her hair, and carrying a katana in her sash. Saya in a dress that was befitting a young princess from the west, her eyes shining behind her glasses. Rei in her new gear, and carrying a rifle fitted with a bayonet. Then Shizuka wearing a sweater and long skirt. Rika was wearing her new standard outfit, a mix of sweat and umbu gear. She also held a gun that I was familiar with, one that I had made for her. Then came Kyoko, the red-haired teacher whose glasses glimmered with her eyes. And the last was Yuki, still wearing her school uniform, though she had a .38 holstered on her right leg. They all smiled at me, and for a moment, I thought that heaven had finally taken me. I then felt my mouth move, and words that I hoped to never say to them came from it. I will destroy you. I then, to something else's control, leapt and proceeded to slaughter them. I tried to wrest control before I could strike down Siko, but something fought back. And it paralyzed my will. I was forced to watch the life leave them with my eyes catching theirs as they struggled to fight the hands of death off. The last to fall was Saya. I finally regained control and rushed to her, holding her as she bled out from my sword piercing her womb, and then her chest. Saya! Please don't die! I'm sorry! I said sorry over and over. She stopped me though, and said 3 words. 3 words that broke me, even though they were just words. I love you, she then passed, and I felt a void in my chest. I screamed and raged to the heavens. It was then that I felt the darkness take me. Though I heard a dark laugh, and a demonic voice holler at me. You will never have a light. You will never love again. 430 Rika's apartment, guest room. One of many. Naruto's eyes shot open. His breath hitching, and coming out in light gasps. He had chilled sweat on his brow, and for a moment he forgot where he was. He forced his eyes around the room, looking for anything that was a threat, and to find an anchor to reality. He then felt the weight on his chest. Looking down slightly, his memories came back. He sighed in relief as he saw the face of Saya, lightly laying there, and if her eyes would have been open, she would have been looking directly into his. Bringing himself back into control took a few minutes, but he finally regained control of his breathing. He stayed there, gazing at her beauty. Just a dream, he whispered. Then he remembered where they were, and what was happening in the world outside. He created a Kage Bunshin, and Kawaramid asterisk with it. Getting dressed, he walked to the kitchen 1 floor below. He took notice that it was empty, and quiet. Not even turning on the light, he went straight to the sink. Running the cold tap for a few seconds, he cupped his hands, and threw water on his face. He then heard the click of the light switch, and shut the water off. Turning to see who was awake, he saw Rika. He heard her gasp, and saw her slowly approach him. "Naruto-kun, are you alright?" He watched her, as she slowly embraced him. He slowly, ever so slowly, returned the embrace. "Your eyes are red," he widened said orbs, shuddering slightly. For a few minutes he said nothing, but finally spoke after what seemed as forever. "I had a dream," he said, his voice almost sounding broken. Rika hummed in a reassuring way. He seemed to have frozen. "Tell me about it, will you?" she asked after a few minutes had passed. He breathed out heavily in a sigh, and let her go. Moving to the marble-top island, and sitting on a bar stool, he sighed again. She took this as a sign that he would need a beer or two, and went to the fridge. Grabbing 2 bottles of imported Budweiser, she closed the cooler's door, and sat one down in front of him. After a moment, he opened the bottle, and took a mouthful. He then started to tell her of what he saw. His eyes really were cursed, he decided. Forcing him to remember everything he saw was not the best thing for someone who was a trained killer and soldier. He felt her rub his shoulder in a soothing way. He knew that she was the only one out of his team that he would open up to. He seemed to be drawn more to the female gender. Though in truth, most men in his life either neglected or betrayed him. He hated having trust issues, but couldn't seem to let them go. He had never really opened up to even the Emperor, who he considered a grandfather. Even more than Hiruzen Sarutobi. After a while, and a few beers, he felt a little better. He shed only a few tears, and felt Rika hold him from behind, her head lightly laying on his shoulder. He knew about her feelings, but suddenly found fear and acceptance. He never wanted his dark side to manifest and attack her, or any of the others. Not like it did in Project 1. "Did he like how I look?" she pondered, as she brushed her hair. Having let it down last night, she also wondered if he would prefer it like this. She then grasped her left breast, and felt the firmness of her nipples. She stopped brushing her hair, and let her hand glide down to her stomach, and then the small patch of pubic hair. She was extremely tempted to just play with herself. She had never done so before, and was suddenly feeling the urge to relieve herself of the building frustration. Chapter 5, Road to the Dead Manor PT2. Last time. Naruto sighed as Rika called up to him, saying that everyone was ready. Siko and Saya had changed their outfits, as did Shizuka. He then leapt off the roof, and headed to his truck. "No going back now. This is the end of the peace I was enjoying not even 2 days ago." He then jumped up to enter the reckoning. "Now." Hanzo looked out the windshield of the reckoning, seeing a lot of the undead converging on the street. "Seems like something is riling them up, boss?" He turned to look at Naruto. The blonde hummed in agreement. His goggled gaze looking straight forward, though he glanced back at the driver. Rika was sitting at the table in the middle of the command center. "Let's get out of here," the blonde said. "Set a course through the back streets. Line up as close as possible to Takagi's gate. Head across the river and push it. I want to be there by sundown." Hanzo nodded, and shifted gears, getting ready to speed through the streets. "So, are we going to knock?" Hanzo mock asked. Naruto chuckled, and adjusted his goggles for more comfort. "What do you think?" Rika then asked. "Boss, how long do you think we will be out here? Shouldn't we push to the?" Naruto cut her off. "We won't be here longer than a week or 2, we'll make it to HQ ASAP." Rika nodded, and went back to the map she was looking at. Naruto then turned to head to the armory. "I'll get the others fitted, keep on course. Don't let anything slow us down," he said before exiting. The silence he left in there felt ominous. "I hope you girls can get through to him," Hanzo said, as he pushed more on the gas pedal. "I hope so too," Rika replied. They could sense his struggle. Kyoko sat next to Yuki. Both had a look of thought on their faces. They had seen the interaction between Naruto and Rika, though hadn't heard the words spoken. "Yuki-chan, do you think we really should make ourselves his girls?" It looked like Rika is the only one to get him to open up. Kyoko asked her favorite student. The orange-haired young lady sighed. "I don't know, but I want to be there for him. I see him, and I feel like I could give him anything and he would lay the world before us if we asked." Kyoko nodded to Yuki's words. "I feel the same, but I still feel like it will be an uphill battle." Yuki nodded, and both looked up as Saya entered the room with Rei and Siko. Saya looked slightly down, though it wasn't easy to see her slightly depressed mood. What happened to her? They both thought. They then looked around for Shizuka, but couldn't find her. "Shizuka-sensei is watching Alice," Rei said, gaining the attention of the two once more. They noticed Siko putting her hand on Saya's shoulder. "What's wrong?" Kyoko asked, wanting to make sure that the rose-haired teen was alright. Saya sighed, but decided to respond. "I told Naruto-kun how I felt last night, but I don't know what he thinks, or feels." She paused for a second. "I got him to respond somewhat, but I never heard him reply." I only got him to let me sleep near him. Kyoko cast her eyes down, before standing up and going to hug the somewhat distraught girl. We should probably see what we can do to help. Has anyone seen Koda? Siko asked politely. Yuki looked up to the ceiling for a moment before responding. I think he went up on that nest. Probably watching out for anything. He always was a bit reclusive though, she said, to which Rei nodded. They then heard Shizuka speaking from the hallway. And this is where we all stay, at least I think this is it, the buxom blonde said to Alice as they entered the room. Yep. This is it. Damn, I forgot how big I made the armory. Naruto sighed as he browsed through weapons and switched out seals to look through others. Why the fuck did I make this again? He asked the heir, not expecting an answer. Because we both know you will need them, Naruto-kun. Came a voice that Naruto recognized. He sighed before turning to see the one woman he regretted yelling at. Kami-sama. The golden-haired deity smiled sadly at the young immortal. It's been a little while, hasn't it? Naruto nodded, before turning back to the rifle section. Grabbing one with a bayonet, he checked the weight and firing mech. A few months, if I remember right. He continued perusing the armory for weapons the others could use, before stopping in the subs section. I must apologize, Kami-sama, I treated you unfairly in our last meeting. The goddess still smiled sadly at him, but moved closer. Naruto-kun, there is nothing you need to apologize for. I slighted you by making you my champion, I destroyed your life. Naruto shook his head, and turned to face her. You have taken my ability to die, you haven't destroyed my life yet. He then turned back to the weapons. So what brings you here, Kami-sama? He asked as he pulled an MP off the rack, checking it before putting it back. Kami sighed, as she watched him continue as if on autopilot. She gazed at him with tears beginning to swell in her eyes. You shouldn't close yourself off to them, Naruto-kun. Your nightmares won't come to pass. You absolved the hatred of Kurama, remember? She watched him stop for a long moment. It isn't that which concerns me. My own darkness is cause for my hesitance. You know how hard I have to fight myself. He then turned to her, taking his goggles off. These eyes are almost as bad as the Uchiha clan's. She nodded to his words. But you have the heart, and the drive to stop it. You know that you are the master, she said as she turned to leave. Just remember what drives you. That will be enough to destroy your personal demons. She then disappeared in a flash of light. Naruto stood there for a while, staring at the same spot. He then sighed. That is what they all told me. My darkness fell silent once before, but I never destroyed it. He turned back to the weapons racks and proceeded to search for suitable ones for the group. Why did you pull me back? I was this close to killing him. Kagero yelled at the woman before him. All I had to do was get a little closer, and I would have. He was cut off as a shock went through his system. You fool, the woman said in a low tone. He could have destroyed you. You think that your one bullet could have really hurt him? He is a regenerator. She turned back to look at the recordings from Kagero's eyes. I should have known better than to think he was as slow as an average person. I had read a few of the reports. But I couldn't even grasp this speed. She had run calculations of the battle. He seems to be as fast as sound. Reaching you so quickly, and still appearing to be holding back, she gritted her teeth. Her brunette locks covering her glasses in shadow. I will have my revenge, Kagero. My father will rest in peace once his soul leaves this mortal coil. Kagero stood back up, recognizing her state of mind. Mary, he whispered before sighing sadly. Koda sighed, as he put his binoculars back into a pouch on his hip. There are far more of them now. Yesterday was only the beginning. He then opened the hatch to go back inside. As he descended the ladder, he felt a small chill run up his spine. I hope that humanity can survive this. He then put his feet on the floor of the hallway, and turned to head towards the armory. Maybe I can help with keeping the guns working. With that thought, he walked towards the first floor. He stopped for a moment outside of the room where all of the girls were, hearing them talking in normal tones, but decided not to pry. He started walking again, not even knowing that his best friend and rescuer was already in the armory. Dead bite or undead? Jack asked, as he browsed through his MP3 player. He then looked out the window of reckoning. Nah, I'll go with I Will Not Bow, by Breaking Benjamin. Sound good, Hans? The driver turned his eyes to the gunner for a moment. I don't know why you listen to that American music, but sure, why not? The gunner shrugged and pressed play. It's good music, he replied. Rika sighed as the song played. It's like it was written for Naruto-kun. He won't bow, and you can't break what already is, she whispered. I hope his heart can be mended. If I have to, I'll share him. If that will make him happy. She finished, standing up and gazing towards the command bridge's exit. And this is the smaller vehicle. I still haven't seen the inside of Eden. She then stepped out, as the two men listened to music. She stepped out as Koda came down the stairs. Nodding to the young gun enthusiasts, they both walked to the armory. As they approached the door, after a few minutes of walking, They heard two people talking inside it. Your nightmares won't come to pass. You absolved the hatred of Kurama, remember? The two paused, not recognizing the voice of a female. There was a long pause, before the voice of Naruto spoke. He sounded cold yet subdued. It isn't that which concerns me. My own darkness is cause for my hesitance. You know how hard I have to fight myself. They looked to each other, before hearing the end of the conversation. These eyes are almost as bad as the Uchiha clans. A slight pause again, before the woman they didn't know spoke again. But you have the heart, and the drive to stop it. You know that you are the master. Just remember what drives you. That will be enough to destroy your personal demons. A strange light appeared beneath the doorway. A little time passed before they heard Naruto mumble. Rika then approached the door, before pausing. Naruto spoke clearly, his voice sounding as it usually did. You two may enter now. Rika hesitated for only a moment, then opened the door. Naruto-kun? She asked as she saw him grabbing a bayonet semi-auto rifle. This should do, he said before placing it on the table. He then turned to the handgun section. I know you heard that conversation. You need not be concerned about it. It is something only I can deal with. He grabbed a .38 and checked it over, before nodding and placing it on the table as well. I don't know if Kyoko and Shizuka know how to use weapons. He then turned to the violet-haired sniper. Rika-chan, does Shizuka-chan know how to use a firearm? He asked in curiosity. She thought for a moment, before nodding slowly. I was able to teach her how to use sidearms. A Glock .9mm if I remember right. We were teens at the time. She answered. Well, we're in luck, I have a few in here. See if you can find suitable weapons for the others, I have to get Siko something. He said as he walked away from the two. Hi Naruto-kun? She asked just as he put his right foot out the door. He paused, and looked back. I'll be fine, Rika-chan. He said before continuing his walk. The door closed behind him. Do you need help, Rika-san? Kota asked. Siko left the barracks, and walked to Naruto's office. She noticed that the door was open, and stepped inside. The room was empty, but she noticed a folder on the desk. Curiosity, getting the better of her, she opened it. Project 1. She read, though couldn't read more as the lettering was in German. She cursed herself for not having taken more language classes. She closed the folder, before something caught her eye. Turning to the right she saw a katana, sheathed in a dark purple scabbard. The blade was a standard length, with white wrappings around the handle. The tsuba and pommel were a dark silver color, with the tsuba depicting the phases of the moon. Her eyes glazed over, as she slowly reached her hands to grasp the sword. The moment her right hand touched the handle, she felt a light chill run through her. This is a solid blade. This was made by a master smith. She lifted the katana from the stand it was placed on. It's like it. She then heard Naruto's voice. She calls to you. Turning with a small start, she was about to apologize. He stopped her before she could utter a single syllable. That blade is known as Taketsu Yaiba no Suki, or Frozen Blade of the Moon. That blade was a gift from Yuna. He looked away for a brief moment. She calls for you, Siko-chan. Wield her well. He then walked to sit at his desk. Siko stared at the blonde with wide eyes. Naruto-kun, I can't accept this. She protested, but was stopped from saying more. That blade is abused. I can't use it properly. My own katana, the Kage Yaiba, is what I am tuned to. That sword calls for you. You are a sword wielder, you know that blades possess their own will. He then looked her in the eye, taking his goggles off. The sword chooses the wielder, not the other way around. She nodded, and smiled at him before bowing. Dano arigato gozaimasu, Naruto-kun. She then shot forward, wrapping him in an embrace and kissing him. It wasn't longer than a few seconds, no lust was behind it. It was short, and filled with gratitude. But there was also that warm feeling coming from her, one that he wanted. More than anything, but was too scared to admit needing it. That emotion he felt from, and for her, was love. He almost let a tear escape. As she pulled back, he gazed into her eyes, and noticed her entrancement by his own. He chuckled quietly. Yuna had the same look in her eyes. He then stood and said one last thing before leaving, having finished placing the folder in his desk. You have beautiful eyes too, Siko-hime. I've been letting them see more of the real me, the side I have kept hidden for a while now. I should open up to them more, but I am frightened of what will happen if I lose to my own darkness. I know I told Kami-sama that these eyes were almost as bad as the Sharingan Naruto side. The reckoning approaching the river once more. The Rinnegan can be worse, he finished his thought, as well as his cigarette. Throwing the butt over the side from the nest. No wonder Nagata lost it. The young commander tried to not let anything get to him. He had tried being an overly joyful person, and a cold weapon. But he knew that he wouldn't be able to keep everything in for long. Grabbing another smoke from his, seemingly endless, cigarette carrier, he lit it whilst pondering his predicament with all of the females in his group. I want to let them and I want to be loved again. To actually be a father, but how can I choose any of them, when I have to fight myself more than the undead? He took a long drag before continuing. For that matter, how could I choose one, and not hurt the others? I've never had to deal with this situation before. Hinata moved on after Nagato attacked. He sighed again. Then noticed Reckoning's proximity to the river, bracing himself as they hit a bump before the water. He then returned to his thoughts, while keeping an eye out for anything. This is so confusing. If only Kurama were here. He then stiffened slightly. Scratch that. The damn fur ball would just scream at me to either pick one, or bag them all, before screaming to shut the fuck up and let him sleep. Although he did get a slight nosebleed from the thought of all of the women. Damn it, he then turned as he heard a chuckle. You know, I think the boss man might be having some pervy thoughts, Jack stated. Naruto just glared at the gunner for a moment before sighing. You normally know I'm here before I can get close. What I say mad at you? Naruto glanced back before returning to his smoke. Just thinking, Jack. Being confused, and hoping to see some things to make dead again soon. The glazed man nodded. Yep. Getting bored too. Naruto nodded, then turned to head back in. Keep watch, but don't steal all the fun when you see more of those poor bastards. The gunner saluted as he left, and replied. Aye, sir. Continuing through the hallway, heading towards his office, Naruto's thoughts shifted. It seems that the doctor is trying to kill me again. I'll need to be ready for anything she will throw at me. He paused, looking towards the wall. Why does nanotechnology resemble the feeling of chakra? And how did she make advancements with such tech? He sighed as he stepped into his office. I'll need to look into this at a later date. Sitting at his desk once more, Naruto turned his laptop on. Pulling open a file that read D&D, he then started glancing over plans for what appeared to be a ship. He continued for around 10 minutes before Jack appeared. Boss, you might want to see this. Standing, Naruto followed the gunner back to the nest. You've got to be fucking with me seriously? Naruto asked, as he gazed at the empty streets that were approaching. Jack shook his head. I asked the same thing. He spoke in a serious tone. I looked up and down the bank. Not one zombie. Naruto's grip on the railing strained the metal. Takagi must be keeping a good eye out. Sanosuke, make sure we aren't blindsided. Naruto then turned to leave. Jack nodded, though flinched at the use of his real name. I hope my little Mira is doing okay even if she thinks I'm dead, the begaussed man thought. Naruto stopped outside of the barracks. I should have thought of a better name for the damn betting room. He opened the door, seeing all but Koda and Rika inside. Look alive. We are getting close to the Takagi estate. So far the streets appear empty, he announced, stepping in, his voice hard, like he was issuing orders to a group of soldiers. However, I expect to see those creatures in a short time. I smell an ambush, so I want all of you to head to the armory and load up. Grab what you find suitable to use, and grab some pouches for ammo. He paused to look at each of the ladies. We don't have time for proper instruction on how to use the firearms you choose. You will be getting first-hand experience in live combat. If you really need help, ask Rika or Koda. Remember to keep the safety off, the gun loaded, and aim for the head. He turned to Shizuka. You are our medic, grab a Glock and keep an eye on Alice. He then turned to Siko. I know you don't prefer guns, but I suggest you get a sidearm. He then glanced at the others. I will be in command until we reach the manor. So if I give an order, you all will follow it. No questions, am I clear? He raised his voice at the end. All of them straightened at his low shout, unconsciously submitting to his authority. Hi! They all responded, recognizing the seriousness in his tone. Good. Now load up. I expect heavy combat soon. He then turned and left. Alice blinked, not understanding why Naruto appeared to be angry. Nisan is scary, she said, hugging Shizuka's leg. The busted nurse turned to the girl and nodded. Saya headed to the door. He's doing that to make sure we get through this alive, but I agree. He seemed colder than my Tusan just now. We better go grab some guns. She then stepped out, followed by Ray. The sound of Reckoning's engine was deafening. The silence of the streets was ominous. If one listened and ignored the sound of the vehicle, one would say they could hear Death himself. Little was said as the girls grabbed some weapons. Ray grabbed an M1A1 super match. She instantly picked it for the fact that it had a spear-like bayonet attached. Siko, after looking for a few seconds, settled on an M92 customized Vertec asterisk. She frowned while holding the light handgun. Having never even considered using a firearm before, she didn't know how they really worked, but took it anyway. Saya grabbed a customized Luger P08 asterisk, with an extended barrel and larger magazine size. It reminded her of her mother's that was on display in the estate. She then grabbed an MP5 SFK. Yuki picked up a custom Colt Delta Elite 10mm auto pistol asterisk, and a Benelli M4 Super 90. Kyoko grabbed a Colt .357 Python asterisk and a Model 94.30-30 rifle star. Shizuka was helped by Rika, getting a slightly modified Glock .9mm. All of them grabbed holsters/straps and hip pouches to carry ammo in. All of the guns had 3 kanji emblazoned into the barrels. Lightning, magnetism, and defense, asterisk all arranged in a circle. After Rika and Kota checked the guns, they walked to the nest. Rika turning into the spare vehicle room. We may need to evacuate, so I'll have transport prepped. She saluted the group as they continued. This can't be good, Jack said as he gazed down at the wires of the barricade, then at the zombies that were starting to surround them. Taking his M16 and turning it to semi-auto. They aren't really smart, are they, boss? He asked as Naruto appeared behind him. Save ammo while you can. If Soichiro hasn't noticed us, we may have to go on foot. Or use the smaller vehicles, Naruto ordered. His visage was tense, muscles coiled and ready. This is what the girls arrived to see. Dozens of the undead, and the 2 men primed for combat. More of the creatures flocking to the reckoning. Naruto unsheathed his katana and sprung from the nest. His leap carrying him over the heads of many of the once humans. His katana was covered in lightning as he landed on one and took its head. The sound of many birds chirping drew the nearest of them. With that, the battle began. Jack took one shot, caving in the skull of a zombie, and taking half the chest of another. Kota jumped the rail, heading to a side balcony that opened just off the roof. Siko and Rei followed Naruto's example, leaping off of the reckoning. The others decided to not do much, only Shizuka and Saya having experience with their sidearms. Saya, having received training from her mother, shot one as it approached beneath Kota's line of fire, joining him in providing support to the melee fighters. Siko's blade flashed out, tasting the flesh of 3 zombies, cutting their upper torso enough to separate their spines. The blade seemed to cast off a hazy and cold mist. She noticed a slight freezing-like effect from the blade, as no blood flew more than an inch before freezing into near-perfect crystals of red drops. You are a special blade, aren't you? She thought as she stepped around another of the undead, bifurcating it vertically. The blade also seemed to stay as clean as when she first drew it. Rei attacked any and all of them that got close to her, fighting as though she were possessed. The bayonet of her rifle ripping through throats, and throwing those she pierced away from her form. She turned as one tried to grab her from behind, hitting it in the face with the stock of her weapon, before cleaving its head with a swipe when she finished turning. Damn it! Return to your graves, she shouted, moving even faster than before. Takashi, would you have become one of these? Were it not for your cremation? Kota took careful aim, as he shot another creature that was getting too close to Siko's back. He was using a DMR that he grabbed before the battle. His other weapons were held in holsters, and the rifles were slung across his back. He smirked as he put another hole in a different zombie. This is a nice gun, a designated marksman rifle, huh? He grinned at how smooth the firearm operated. Naruto breathed out, as he felled another of the undead. The fight had been going for around 20 minutes by now. Noticing Siko behind him, he made a decision. Pulling a radio comm out, he spoke. Hanzo, get to the Takagi estate and tell Lord Takagi that I and one other will arrive in the morning. Lady Yuriko is approaching, get Death's Reckoning there and lock it down. You are to represent me until I arrive. Get the others to safety, he said as he sensed a group of people heading towards them on the other side of the barricade. He turned off the radio, and charged chakra into his vocal cords. He then hollered at the zombies. Over here, you freaks. I'm a to-go buffet. He then turned and ran while still yelling obscenities at the undead, moving at a civilian's pace. Siko followed him. Rei made to as well, but was stopped by Kota. Chapter 6, Shrine of Dead Melting the Ice Part 1. Last time. Naruto breathed out, as he felled another of the undead. Noticing Siko behind him, he made a decision. Pulling a radio comm out, he spoke. Hanzo, get to the Takagi estate and tell Lord Takagi that I and one other will arrive in the morning. Lady Yuriko is approaching, get Death's Reckoning there and lock it down. You are to represent me until I arrive. Get the others to safety, he said as he sensed a group of people heading towards them on the other side of the barricade. He turned off the radio, and charged chakra into his vocal cords. He then hollered at the zombies. Over here, you freaks. I'm a to-go buffet. He then turned and ran while still yelling obscenities at the undead, moving at a civilian's pace. Siko followed him. Rei made to as well, but was stopped by Kota. Now. The group watched as Naruto and Siko ran through the mass of walking flesh-eaters, disappearing for a moment, seeing them reappear heading up some stairs. The creatures followed the noise of the blonde, and leaving the group alone. Naruto-kun, the girls thought, hoping he would be alright. Forgetting through their worry that he could wipe out more than this amount of enemies. It was then that Saya heard a voice calling to them from the other side of the barricade. Huh! she asked as she turned to see a group of people moving to them. The one who called removed their helmet, revealing Lady Takagi Yuriko. "Ka-san!" Saya yelled, and ran to the fence. "Open it, and let them through!" The older Takagi called to her followers. Saya then turned back to where she could just barely make out Naruto. "Naruto Kyuen! Head to my house as soon as you can!" She screamed, not knowing if he heard or not. She then approached her mother, giving the woman a hug. Naruto stopped to cleave another zombie in two. Well, they made it. He then turned to Siko, and watched as the swordswoman sliced another head off. "You heard her, right?" he asked when she turned to him. She nodded before both turned to see even more of the creatures shuffling towards them. "Wanna compete, Siko-chan?" he asked. "Run towards the nearby shrine, whoever has the more kills wins." Siko smirked, feeling her bloodlust start to take over. "Sure," she replied, before rushing towards the mass of zombies. Naruto laughed, before following. He kept himself at her level, just to be fair. Though he used his own style. Both moving as though they were dancing, twirling and slicing. Cleaving and impaling. Leaving in their wake a river of blood and gore. Appearing as agents of the Shinigami, reaping retribution to the soulless abominations that plagued the world. If one could record it, it would be the epitome of death. All appearing as a dance of blades and blood. Siko noticed that Naruto's walls were slowly eroding, as he seemed to enjoy this dance of death. Their blades flashed around them, and more blood spilled in the last 10 minutes than she had ever seen before. She wondered bravely if this is what he lived in during his war. She slowed a little and watched as he spun in a twirling flip. When he landed, all she saw after a second was a red mist where the creatures once stood. Her eyes widened slightly, even as she struck another one of them. After 20 minutes, they had reached a fountain in the middle of a crosspath in a park. She nearly froze as she saw the amount of zombies, though she continued on as Naruto leapt into the mass of undead. They continued, flashes appearing as Naruto cleaved into them, rending more of the things inert. She turned with a bloodthirsty grin, but froze as she saw children. No, not kids. Her breath itched as she saw one approaching her, its intestines hanging out, and most of its face torn. She could see the right side of its skull with pieces of flesh hanging off, and the eye missing. She stumbled back, having felt terror, and nearly fell into the clutches of another. But before the once child could grab her, she found herself in the arms of Naruto. She noticed that ground was now below them. He had grabbed her in a bridal carry, and jumped on top of the fountain. "Are you alright, Siko-chan?" She turned to him, with tears finally falling. She then wrapped her arms around his neck and sobbed. He could see why, as he also felt his stomach lurch. Knowing that even children fell into this hell, being unable to run from the flesh-eaters. He sighed, and made a seerless Kage Bunshin. Nodding, the doppelganger leapt down and breathed in, letting the breath go with a shout. Fire style, majestic flame destroyer, asterisk from his breath came a roaring inferno, that spread with a speed that even a bullet would sweat to match. Siko turned, and watched as the flame engulfed all in front of the clone. Her eyes were wide, and Naruto could smell the fear from her. He held her closer, and turned her head into his chest. He didn't want her to watch as the things were turned to ash. The bottom of his coat was floating from the wind, with embers and paces of flame falling around them. From his goggles, one could see an otherworldly glow of purple. The flame made it seem as though the sun was next to them, even though it was just about to fall below the horizon. The heat wrapped around them, as the clone finally stopped and dispelled. After a few moments, when the heat died down, he spoke. "It's alright now, they are gone." He then moved, jumping down from the fountain, and headed towards the shrine he had seen. Naruto moved with a near spectre-like silence. He kept Siko's head in place, not letting her look around them. He had summoned a few clones after leaving the park, to make sure the way was clear. He could still sense Siko's fear, but it didn't appear to be aimed at him. Those children have shaken her up pretty bad. He sighed as they approached the shrine, watching as his clones took out the undead. "I'll have to keep the clones around. I can't let Sikoheim fight right now," he thought, not even realizing that he called her a princess. "I should have grabbed the jeep, at least." He almost deadpanned at his thoughtlessness. "I'm loosing my touch," he whispered, so lowly that Siko only caught the word loosing. She brought her face closer to his neck, while keeping her eyes clenched shut. She shivered slightly as the darkness grew from the night. Naruto commanded a clone mentally to remove his goggles. The clone did, allowing the eyewear to fall around his neck, before getting back into its station. They weren't moving fast, preferring to stay as silent as possible, and sticking to using katanas. They had been moving for only 20 minutes, being cautious. He sighed again as they passed the archway, having the clones go and take care of the creatures. He slowed to a walk, approaching the door to the place of worship. "This will have to do," he said as the last zombie was slain. He chuckled slightly. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, commander of the allied shinobi forces reduced to a zombie slayer. He chuckled again. How quaint, he said as he opened the door with a small bit of gravity manipulation. His Rinnegan glowing lowly while using the power. He then set Siko down on her feet, helping her move to the old shrine statue. Sikoheim, are you alright? He asked, staring into her still fearful eyes. She nodded slowly, allowing him to guide her to the base of the statue. She sunk to her knees, and he could tell she was at war with herself. If it helps, they weren't children anymore, Haim. Her breath itched once, before she began to cry quietly. He embraced her, feeling his heart tear slightly at the sight. He knew that she hadn't cried in a long time, and it tore him apart to know that he couldn't do much to ease the pain. He held her closer, allowing her to soak his coat with her tears. Rika glanced at Hanzo as the driver spoke to Lady Takagi. She was worried, but knew that the two missing would be fine. She had never seen Naruto actually let loose his full power. She had only seen him train a few times. No one has ever seen him go all out. She then turned as a massive wall of flame appeared in the nearby park. Hanzo deadpanned for a moment as everyone watched the fire die out. Well, boss is just fine, he said, which made everyone look at him. Jack laughed before turning to walk away from the mansion's entryway. I'll be in the reckoning, he said, moving away from the group. Though he mumbled slightly. He's starting to get a little more serious use. Rika watched as the last of the flames disappeared. I will need to investigate this outbreak, and it's worldwide too, Naruto sighed as he made a clone to unseal a sleeping bag for Siko. He gazed around the shrine's main room, spotting a few scrolls hung around while open. Most likely tales of past priests, or edicts of being a holy one. It'll have to do for now. He then placed the now sleeping swordswoman on the sleeping bag. It was blue, and at least more comfortable than the bare floor. He looked around once more, feeling as though he was being watched. He even looked up towards the ceiling, and only noticed a single camera that appeared to be turned off. That he knew it wasn't. He made sure to not gaze at it for too long, seeming to only sweep his gaze past it. What game will be played here, I wonder? It appears that I won't be getting any sleep tonight. Looking at a monitor that was centered on Naruto, from the camera, was Kishikara Kagero. The man smiled, and spoke to the woman next to him. Look, Mira. He is at the entrance to your hiding place. What would you have me do? The woman next to him barely spoke, though he heard it. Kidnap the girl, it might make him more compliant. Do not fail, Kagero. Surveillance from the park showed him being even more terrible than when he fought you. She then turned her amber gaze to the man, her light hair seeming to turn gray in the dim light. He was holding back, he always has been. We will have our revenge, Kagero, even if it kills us. She spoke with finality, her gaze showing nothing but consuming flames in her will. Naruto sat beside the candles he had lit, just beneath the statue. Siko slept just a few feet away from him. He had been sitting still for 30 minutes. The mark of sage mode around his closed eyes. It was hard to enter such a state these days, seeing as how this world didn't have such a great connection to nature. It took longer, and carried darker emotions than his home world did. So much blood has been spilled in this world, so much hatred fills the air. This zombie fiasco only makes it worse. He sighed as he thought this, before opening his eyes. He had sensed the same feeling he had from Kagero, as well as someone who was nearly consumed by revenge. This will be a long night. He made a few more clone to watch over Siko, and one to keep a connection to nature, with as little a connection as he possibly could get. He then stood, and made sure his weapons were secure. Let us dance, Kagero, let us dance, he said before seeming to disappear in a blur that not even the advanced camera could track. He had decided to end this. Knowing where the man was coming from, and sensing the intent behind the man's actions. Kagero sighed, as he pulled his gun blade from its holster. I know I'm not gonna win. He then looked to his left forearm, watching as the new computer read his status, and showed the charge level for his newest attack. He looked back to the shrine, noticing the silhouette of the man he wanted revenge against. No, not a man. He then stepped forth, watching as the shadow of Naruto Namikaze stayed in place, as though it were frozen. Kagero placed a foot into the shrine's courtyard, a bead of sweat trailing down the side of his jaw. Kagero knew that this was it. He knew that only one of them would walk away. A cloud had covered the moon, nearly throwing everything into shadows. He then saw the strange ethereal glow from behind Naruto's goggles. He nearly froze at the sight of it. He gulped, noticing the chill in the air. It wasn't a natural chill, it seemed to come from the blonde warrior in front of him. As though the Shinigami was present and possessing his opponent. Kagero nearly jumped when the shadow spoke. Before we begin, Kishikara-san, allow me to ask one question. The voice was cold, and said as a monotone. Kagero shivered slightly, but managed to nod. For what reason would you be trying to kill me so zealously? Kagero tensed, trying to find his voice, as the clouds moved away from the moon's light. He then saw something behind the blonde. It was spectral in appearance, and truly frightening. It appeared as a fox with 9 tails, and covered in demonic armor, with wings much like a crow's. From its helmeted gaze was two red glowing orbs. The eyes were a deeper red, almost like it was gazing with blood instead of eyes. The creature seemed to grin, as it put a human-like hand to its waist. It pulled a demonic blade, and snarled at the man. Frozen, Kagero nearly screamed as it pointed at him. A demonic whisper echoing around him. Answer, worm. He took a step back, his fight or flight instincts screaming to run. He fought that feeling, with trepidation. I told you already you stole my position. The fox seemed to chuckle, while Naruto frowned. No, that is not true, the blonde said, as the air grew colder. I see, so little Mira thinks that her father is really dead, he said after a few moments of gazing at the ex-Hayabusa agent. Kagero's eyes widened slightly, when the blonde spoke again. Foolish. She received the medical reports. The blonde then grabbed his blade, as 6 more appeared, floating around him. Let us dance now, Kagero-chan. Let me show you the truth, the blonde said, sliding into the stance that he had mastered, seeming as though he would be using a type of Yato * style. In truth it was close to the type, but far more advanced. His katana wasn't attached to his hip though, and he had 6 more circling him at a constant pace. Kagero's instincts screamed even louder. He tried to turn, finally listening to them, but found the blonde in front of the gate. He then dodged a slice from one of the floating blades, jumping back, trying to get away. He aimed a shot at Naruto. The resounding echo of the gunshot rang out. He then froze as the blonde sliced the .44 round into so many paces he couldn't count. It was done with the blonde's main katana. It only looked like one slice. How can he? He should be just a man. He then noticed the blonde dissolving, and he rolled forward as 2 more blades shot towards him at a traceable speed. He sighed. At least my nano can keep up with those fast as bullets. He then flinched as he felt a strike to his arm. Looking to his left, he saw Naruto, without goggles. He froze at seeing the purple eyes of the Rinnegan. Orbs that now had pupils appearing as a cross of bars, and glowing a deep purple. He almost screamed, looking into those depths, appearing both demonic and divine. In that small span of time, he felt another 8 slashes appear on him. The blonde appeared to dance, the purple glow of his eyes creating dim streaks of light while following. His blade flashing faster than even Kagero could track. Though he was able to block a few strikes, Kagero's suit still suffered, as did his flesh. Siko awoke as the sound of a single shot rang out around the shrine. She pushed herself up, when she heard a snarl coming from the door. Looking to the source, she saw a brunette woman trying to get past a wall of purple flames. She also noticed 4 Narutos sitting in a lotus position at the corners of the room. She also heard the telltale sounds of a sword slicing through the air. She couldn't really see past the doorway very well, though she did see a flash. Like someone swung a sword at a fast speed in the moonlight. Damn it! The woman cursed, finally seeing that Siko was awake. The woman scoffed before turning to the sounds. Siko grabbed her blade, before slowly standing. What the hell is going on? Who is this woman? She then saw the woman stiffen slightly before running out, and shouting, Kagero! Siko followed the woman, stopping in front of the wall of flames. She then saw Naruto, with a disarmed man standing in front of him. The man was wounded, though the cuts were superficial, not even really constituting a true concern about it. What really set the 2 ladies off was Kagero's glazed eyes. He appeared to be staring at something behind the blonde. Something they could not see. Suddenly Naruto moved, appearing to defy the natural order by moving so fast that after images appeared. Naruto heard the woman's shout, recognizing her as Mira. He then saw Siko watching them. So I must end this now, Kagero, my apologies. But if you wish to find the truth, then go to the surrounding forest. 20 miles south of Tokunosu, then 5 miles west. The blonde sighed, before moving. He spoke one last time before finally disappearing. In 5 days. Naruto then moved. To everyone else he just flashed away, leaving behind an after image. To him, time seemed to slow to a crawl. He slid around Kagero, and drew his katana, slightly raking it across Kagero's back, inflicting a type of wound that was much like a paper cut. More of a burning annoyance than an actual injury. He flipped over Kagero, and did the same to his chest. His left foot barely touching Kagero's right, he then moved again, swerving around to Kagero's left, his blade running thrice across the man's arm. Looking like a tiger had scratched him lightly with only 3 claws. Naruto then spun around to Kagero's left, the tip of his sword slightly leaving a cut across both shoulders of his opponent. He then sliced down Kagero's left arm, and stopped as his blade slightly pierced Kagero's foot, before moving back to his front. He then sheathed his blade, before redrawing it, and slicing across Kagero's face, leaving a wound across his nose that would scar over. He then slowly resheathed his sword. Just before the blade clicked in place to the scabbard, time seemed to resume. As the tsuba finally made the sound of tapping the scabbard, the blood finally flew. It was an intimidating sight. Asterisk. Kagero fell backwards, though the wounds weren't serious, the amount of blood would draw concern. Mira ran forward, as soon as Naruto reappeared in his starting position. Kagero! She yelled again, sprinting to the man that was helping her. She didn't even care that the man she wanted to kill was so close. She finally reached the gunblade Wilder, as he finally screamed. Naruto turned away from them, and spoke in an ear whisper. Though it was heard by all. As soon as he has recuperated, ask him about my words. When you reach the place I have mentioned, you will see Sanosuke again. He then walked to the barrier he set up. Passing through it, as though there was nothing there. He didn't turn to see Mira carry Kagero away with some difficulty. He knew she had heard him, though he didn't appear to be concerned, and spoke to Siko. You should rest more, Hein, we will leave at first light. He sighed as he slumped back down in his chosen spot, and appeared to fall asleep. The 4 clones holding the barrier stayed, letting nothing in. And nothing would leave until Naruto wanted anything to do so. Siko nodded, though she sighed in relief when she noticed the blonde's still continuous light breathing, showing that he was still awake. She had to stop herself from moaning in lust at the sight of his power. She was able to, but didn't even know that he could smell her arousal. She then walked back to the sleeping bag, and laid down in it. She turned to watch him, before deciding to talk with him. I know what you want to ask, Sikoheim, Naruto said, his eyes still closed. You may not like the answer, but you may ask your question. He then opened his eyes, his ringed orbs appearing as depths of emotion that was locked behind a wall. Appearing to have been frozen so deeply, that she wasn't sure if she could melt the ice around his heart. They also appeared to hide a wisdom that only one who had seen the end of a world could understand. Hoping to finally unravel the enigma that was Naruto, she sat up again. Preparing for anything, she spoke. Naruto-kun, what happened to you? She paused, trying to find the words she wanted to say. Why did your journal seem more like a report than what should be put in such a book? Why are you so strong, and how did you become immortal? She asked, concern showing in her blue eyes. Naruto sighed, wondering why he made it seem like he didn't care about his past. He admitted mentally that he should have described more in his journal. He then heard her ask one last thing. And what was Project 1? His shoulders slumped a little at that one. He knew that all of the group was starting to wonder. Only he and his gunner knew everything about that. He sighed again, before leaning back to rest his back on the wall. I was born on October 10th. In the 3rd year of the Yondaime Hokage's reign, roughly 600 years after the shinobi era began. I can't say for sure what the year really was, as it was said that the Rakuta Sannin died shortly after the era started. We called him the first shinobi. Lab led him as a god among men. He paused, unsealing some water bottles. After giving her one, he continued. On the day of my birth, my mother was in a special place designed for Jinchuriki to give birth. My mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was the second Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune. The chakra spirit that was called as such, because no one else knew the so-called demon's name. My father, Namikaze Minato, also known as Kanohigakure's Kuroi Senku the Yondaime Hokage, was overseeing the process. To ensure that the seal wouldn't break, he paused to take a drink. That day, a man who called himself Madara broke through the barrier around the place. He managed to kill the Umbu guards and the Sanname's wife, kidnap me, and nearly blowing the place to hell. Naruto then continued his story, pausing to drink water every now and then. Siko found herself entranced, listening as he explained what the word Jinchuriki meant. She could see images floating through her mind as he described his village in detail. She could see the people he spoke about. She could imagine the life he led, as he finally got to the tale of Sasuke's defection. She wondered briefly how he could change from such a bright and loving soul. She found herself smiling when he spoke of his nearly useless training trip with Jiraiya. His tale continued, all the way through his brief depression at the pervert's death, and to the redemption of Nagato. He then spoke of the first few months of the war. Still seeming like the man he once was to be bright. He then spoke of his brief time with Sakura. We were finally happy somewhat. I was glad that she finally resolved her feelings. Those days, nothing could bring me down. I felt invincible. Sakura-chan, at the time, was my pillar of strength. We held each other up, as though we could touch the stars, and never suffer. He paused again, draining the last of his water. On the day of that mission, the day she died, I was in sorrow, and enraged. That day, Madara and Obito lost half of their forces. 4 of their Edo Tensei warriors fell in my rage. Kurama was also pissed. He completely destroyed the souls that were tethered to the corpses, and the Zetsu soldiers were erased from existence. He paused to gather a breath, and Siko noticed a single tear fall. After that day, I encloaked myself in a shield of rage. I dove into Umbu, the Black Ops forces of Konoha. After completing the mandatory training, I immediately ran headfirst into wartime S-rank missions. As you know, my squad leader was Yuzuki Yugao. I was accepted into her squad, because of my scores and throughout training, and because they had lost a member just a few days before I joined them. He then cast his gaze upward, appearing to look out into nothing, completely focused on his memories. I wasn't happy, but Yugao-chan changed that. What if Naruto Immortal High School of the Dead Harem? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.